For August 12th, 2014, order at 7:30 p.m. Thank everybody in the audience for attending. Thank those who are watching, and special thanks to Hingham for making arrangements for this meeting to be televised. This evening, we will start with questions from the public on items not on the agenda. We have some minutes to approve. The majority of our meeting will be spent discussing the Hingham Middle School athletic field proposal. We will have some discussion. We expect to take a couple of votes. At the end of that session, we still have a little bit of business to do in terms of liaison responsibilities and compliance, some end-of-year closeout, give the committee an update on a reserve fund transfer, and any matters not anticipated within 48 hours. To start, are there any questions from the public on items not on the agenda this evening? Okay. With that, I actually would like to just take a moment to introduce the members of the advisory committee. In particular, we have 4 appointed new members this year. 3 are who are in attendance tonight. One who is on vacation. So I'd like to start, Eric. And could you maybe tell who you are, what you do professionally, and previous kind of town committee experience?
Sure. My name is Eric Haskell. I'm an attorney. I practice at a law firm called Foley Hoag in Boston. With my wife, Ann, we live on High Street, right near the Plymouth River School. And previously, I've been involved with the town's committee to study electronic voting at town meeting, which you may remember from this past year's town meeting. Thank you. Dan?
I'm Dan Coughlin. I've lived in Hingham for 30 years, and I'm a partner in a private equity firm that manages investment real estate for pension funds and institutions. I also teach at Boston University. My town involvement has been included, this was 12 years on the Water Supply Committee, 6 years on the Conservation Commission, 5 years on the CPC, and I was also involved in the task force for the Commander Anderson Veterans House on Fort Hill Street. So.
You're welcome. Tom?
I'm Tom Bellier. I'm a local businessman. I've served 4.5 years on the Hingham Recreation Commission, and I've been a lifelong resident of this town, which means 60-something years.
Welcome. And our 4th new member who is on vacation is Carolyn Murray. Carolyn is a partner at Kopelman & Page. She has extensive background in municipal law. Prior to joining that firm, she was actually town council for the city of Braintree. So we look forward to her joining as well. And just again, for the benefit of the television audience, and Donna, maybe just if everybody can introduce themselves, just who you are.
Donna Smallwood.
Jim Sharkowski.
Greg McKim. Tom Piles. Jim Taylor.
Craig McKay.
Linda Kutch. Lucy Hancock.
Ted Joyce.
Okay, thanks everybody. Our next item is approval of the minutes from June 24th. I think those were sent out in advance. Got a motion.
There was one minor typing error that Tom, our new member, caught, and that has been corrected.
Okay. So I've got a motion to approve the minutes as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay. Greg McCune is abstaining because he was absent. Tom Bellier, Eric, Dan, Jim Taylor. Thank you. Okay. The main part of our meeting is going to be focused on the Hingham Middle School athletic fields. And before we start, I would just like to read into the record the names of letters and emails that this committee has received from various citizens on this project. We received correspondence from Mary Farrington, Cynthia and Brad Galco, Liza O'Reilly, Tom Hoffman, Margaret Conity, Marissa Costello, Stacy and John Feely, Ann and Charles Williams, Valerie Robin and Brian Kavanaugh, and we received 2 letters that were unsigned. So Jim, for the minutes, if you could just please make note of the correspondence that the committee received.
Done.
Thank you. As a way to start this discussion and a way to set a little bit of context, I think it's important as we kind of start this decision to realize that everybody, kind of who's in this room and everybody who's opined on this matter plays a really important job in discussing the question before us. If you think about our sports organizations, they've done a terrific job providing programs for Hingham youth. And, their biggest problem is that participation is so high that there aren't enough fields in town. And the Field Improvement Project at the high school has put a big dent in the shortage of fields, but it doesn't totally address the shortage. And so, as a result, members of sports organizations have asked if the town would consider installing a turf field to better meet the needs of the people they serve. And that's part of the job that they need to do for the town. Our school building committee has overseen the construction of 2 schools, both of which are on time and under budget, and we thank them for that. And they've been asked to consider a matter that was brought before them, and they're carefully considering the pros and cons of that. And that's their job, too. We've heard from citizens. Some citizens have said, I didn't sign up for a turf field when I voted for the middle school. Other citizens say, I'm very comfortable with my tax dollars being used for a turf field. And if you think about our form of town government and town meeting, these are citizens that are doing their job as well by letting us know what they think. As members of the advisory committee, we have 2 important jobs. One is that we're a proxy for town meeting. And in that capacity, we have a responsibility to provide an opinion whether installing a turf field at the middle school using contingency dollars is within the spirit of what town meeting approved in 2011. We also wear a hat as the finance committee for the town. And part of that job is to assess the implications of proposals, make sure that due diligence has been completed, and provide a recommendation based on what we believe is in the best interests of the entire town. And those of you who have been to our meetings, we rarely all agree on that, but again, that's kind of part of the process. If you think about what's before us tonight, I think there are 3 points of view. There's one point of view that says town meeting authorized a dollar amount to build the middle school, and the building committee has the legal authority to spend up to that amount. And that point of view says it's okay to use contingency funds to install a turf field, and moreover says that the savings that typically come from reduced maintenance costs typically offset the installation costs, and you can use that asset more intensively, and that's a good thing. There's a second point of view that we've heard, and that point of view says this is not so much about turf versus grass, but kind of more about the process. And that point of view says turf wasn't part of the original project approved by town meeting, and the building committee should ask taxpayers before committing funds to it. And really kind of that point of view is summarized by the question that we've heard, just because the school building committee has the authority to do this, should they? And then there's a third point of view that says that while the idea of a turf field has some good merit, there may not be enough information about cost and scope right now to make a commitment. And I think I heard the phrase last week at the selectmen's meeting, by giving the go-ahead to do this without that information, are we kind of putting the cart before the horse? In terms of updated information, I would just point you to one new piece of information that's in your folders, and that is an updated copy of our 15-year debt schedule. And what you'll see on the debt schedule is that, as we've always seen it, it has 2 lines. It has our debt service and our financial policy. And what you'll notice is that if you compare this debt schedule to what we saw at town meeting, we were over our financial policy with debt service for several years and then dropped back down. Well, this debt service schedule actually reflects the savings from a lower general contractor bid, a lower interest rate of 2%, and the tax relief that town meeting approved for FY15. So this is some information that might be helpful to our discussion tonight. There have been some statements made about kind of, what's the town going to borrow, what's the town going to collect, and I think there's been a little confusion about that, so I do want to just take a minute and clarify that. First of all, the town can only borrow what it needs to pay for the project. That's all we can borrow. And if the project costs less to build, we borrow less money. We can't borrow more than what we need. Now, so that's the borrowing part. Then there's a part with collections. And we are authorized to collect what town meeting approved in 2011. And remember, at that time, the school was going to cost about $60 million. We assumed a 4% interest rate because we weren't sure what was going to happen. And we also said the cost for building this school, Hingham's portion of it, is going to be paid by Hingham taxpayers. So now we're in 2014, and three things have happened. The first thing is the cost to build the school is lower. The second thing is that long-term interest rates are lower than 4%. And the third thing is that at town meeting, we approved some tax relief. For FY15, it's $1 million. And so the effect of those three things effectively are going to reduce how much we collect from taxpayers. We did tax relief to lower people's tax bill, or to reduce the rate of increase of the addition of the middle school. And the middle school debt presentation that Sue put together, and Sue, thank you very much for putting that together, it shows the effect of those different things for the average assessed value home over the life of the project. And if you look at those graphs, the collective impact is pretty significant. We're not intending to go through that presentation in detail tonight because so many of us were at the selectmen's meeting and watched the selectmen's meeting. But during kind of the question period, Sue, we're happy to answer questions about it. I would say just one thing, and that is that as we look at tax relief, the using the meals tax to offset the cost of the school, we need to keep in mind that that's going to happen in fiscal year 15, but it's not going to happen in the out years without town meeting authorization. And we talked about that last year as we had those articles. And I would just say that if the town says, hey, we're going to take this meals tax revenue and we're going to use it for something else, then we're not going to be able to use it to lower the debt service on the middle school. So, if we're going to use it for the middle school, then we're using it there. We can't kind of use it in two places. So tonight, the way this is going to work is we're going to have some time for discussion, open it up to questions and comments from the public, and then have some discussion. And at the conclusion of our discussion, we're going to take a straw poll because we don't have a formal article or piece of business before us on two things. The first one is whether the advisory committee recommends that the building committee seek town meeting approval prior to making a decision to install a turf field at the middle school. So that kind of gets to the process decision, the process question. And secondly, whether we think this proposal is ready to be voted or whether we think some additional information should be helpful. So those are the two things that I see us voting. Now, depending on those votes, we may also do a straw poll on whether or not we support the installation of a turf field at the middle school. But if it's the conclusion of this committee that, if it's the recommendation of this committee to go to town meeting or it may not be ready for a vote, there's no point in voting it tonight because it may come back to us. So I'm going to turn it over to Tom. He's going to kind of summarize the facts. At the end of that, we're going to kind of keep with the practice that Greg established last year. We'll go around the table and ask questions based on seniority. And the one thing I would ask is that you know, as we're talking about this, you know, please try, let's all try to focus our questions and comments on the issue that's before us tonight. And I know sometimes it's kind of tricky to not creep into something else, but I think that'll ensure that we're using our time well tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom.
Thank you. As Mary said, we've received many letters concerning the middle school fields turf project, some pros, some cons, and it appears to us that this, again, is a controversial issue before the town. I've always been impressed that the citizens of Hingham have been so passionate about their town business. We may have varying opinions on a particular subject, but we must stay civil in our discourse. What is vital concern to all of us is that there's always transparency and process involved. The middle school opening is just around the corner, and this is the time for the town to come together and celebrate a wonderful accomplishment. The school building committee is to be congratulated on a job well done. Now to the turf issue, a little history lesson. Many of us at the table are new, and it might be helpful to review the history of the middle school building. It was authorized at a special town meeting in October of 2011 with a projected cost of $60.9 million. The school building committee at that time was authorized to administer to the construction of the middle school. The plans called for non-irrigated grass fields. Incidentally, at the same time, that special town meeting authorized design money for the phasing of the high school fields reconstruction also at that time. An ad hoc committee was formed to recommend facilities and locations for the middle school, for the high school fields. Their process included an analysis of the benefits of a synthetic turf surface for their multi-purpose field. Their ultimate recommendations were approved by the school committee and ultimately by town meeting in April of 2013. The multi-purpose field was placed into use last fall to much acclaim. During the design phase of the multi-purpose field, a second turf field was considered to be permitted at the high school for some future construction. This was to be privately funded. To allow for less confusion at that time, this concept of a second turf field was deferred at that time. Meanwhile, very hard at work, the school building committee was busy with the construction of the middle school. Initially, the bids for the project came in at approximately $2.5 million under the estimated cost, which was authorized by town meeting. Due to the watchful eye of the school building committee, a $2.5 million contingency fund has only been needed for approximately $500,000 of change orders to date. There is likely to be additional change orders before the project's completion, but the project will come in on time and significantly under budget. Under normal circumstances, unused funds would be used to reduce debt associated with the project and subsequently reduce the impact to on the taxpayer. Again, we need to congratulate the school building committee for their hard work. With the successful launch of the multi-purpose field at the high school, a need for a second turf field again resurfaced late last year. The school building committee has been discussing this issue over the last few months. They have determined to have as much dialogue as possible to get input from the citizens of Hingham before making any decision. I stress the school building committee has yet to vote to go forward with this project. They have held well-publicized hearings on June 24th. They presented their case to the Board of Selectmen last week and are before us tonight. The school committee will be taking this issue up at their meeting on August 20th. The school building committee is scheduled to vote on this project on September 3rd. All of these meetings have been posted, have been open to the public for input. We trust that the school building committee will listen to all points of view, both pros and cons, before voting on this project. At the June 24th meeting, the school building committee engineer provided potential layout options and very preliminary cost estimates for the turf field at the middle school. It should be noted that the project has yet to be designed, and as such, no firm estimates are available. The costs vary for the various layouts presented on June 24th ran from $641,000 to $868,000. Note that these costs are not reimbursable by the MSBA. While the upfront costs are indeed significant, the life cycle analysis of the turf versus grass would suggest that the investment would be a sound one. If the project were to be pursued at these levels, the installation would be taken from the contingency funds and come well under the remaining funds available. The project would subsequently be vetted by the Planning Board, Concom, and perhaps other committees. The original timeline for the fields was that the grass surface would be available for the spring of 2016. If the project were to commence this fall, as authorized by the school building committee, the turf fields would be available for the spring of next year, 2015. However, if the project were deferred for town meeting in 2015, and it was voted affirmatively, then the fields would be available in the fall of 2015. Everybody get the timelines there? I think I'd like to have Ray, if he has any comments that he would offer from what I've stated, what Mary stated, this might be a good time to do that.
I think those were great comments. I've nothing to add.
Okay. What we intend to do is have the committee ask questions of me or Ray or any of the other school building committee members, clarifications of what has been discussed so far, concerns that they have, and we'll start with that, and then we'll go to the public.
Yep.
And if you don't mind, I'll take the privilege of asking a few questions of Ray first. I think one of the questions that have to be asked at this time is if we weren't involved in this project, the middle school project, and if financing wasn't necessarily an issue, what would be the ideal location for a second turf field? Or any of your committee, or Margaret, since she's here.
And Ray, I would ask for anyone answering questions, if you could please come up to the microphone and identify yourself for the audience. Thank you.
Ray Estes, 94 Hill Street. I am the chairman of the school building committee, but I am not here speaking on behalf of the school building committee. As Tom stated, we have not fully considered this issue nor taken a vote. I don't know the answer to that, in short, where the ideal location in town would be. Certainly someone suggested it might be a location other than the middle school. I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. However, I think the main reason why the focus is on the middle school is because of the timing and the opportunity. Could it be located elsewhere? I think certainly that would be a decision to be made by somebody else at some other time with some other funding ability.
I think we've heard several times from other citizens, not necessarily for this issue, and by the Board of Selectmen as well. It would be nice to have had a master plan involved with all of the fields in the town so that we might have more information to make these decisions. Margaret, do you have anything that you wanted to add to that question?
Margaret Conity, 15 Daly Road, Hingham, Director of Athletics. Regarding, is this the best place for it? I mean, if I had my way, we'd be putting a lot everywhere. But, the way I see the value of the middle school putting a field there is, one, it's a place where people will be. It's not isolated, and that's an important point, I think, because if you have a field, a synthetic field, it's an attraction for sure. no matter where you put it. And if it's in a place where there's not a lot of traffic, let's the industrial park. I'm not sure that's a good place where we would like to put a field like that. It invites a lot of problems, I think. It could invite vandalism. It could invite a place. Do we want our children in a place that is pretty isolated? And I'd even suggest that the fields over, now I'm having a hard time thinking of the names of them, over by the DPW. The activity level at night there, I suspect it's pretty isolated. I'm just not sure that's something that we really want to do. And so I think the middle school, given the circumstances, is rather ideal in that, A, there is ample parking, B, there's quite a bit of activity in terms of the custodial staff, teachers, administrators being active there, and it's a place where our children call home while they're there. And the other point about this, and I brought it up in the letter that I wrote, something that we hadn't anticipated at the high school that has come about. The physical education classes has just exponentially improved in terms of activity, being able to be outside, not coming in with wet feet for the rest of the day. And I know that doesn't matter to anybody unless they're your feet. But it's just something that, I've talked to the physical education teachers, and one of them said to me, "You've just extended my career by so much." And that's something not to be dismissed, because especially at the middle school level, those children, there needs to be that kind of activity offered to them, not just during the day. And that's important, because if the field, say there was a field being moved elsewhere, they wouldn't have that opportunity to enjoy what the high school students are enjoying right now. But also, it's their intramural program after school. I think you would see that grow in leaps and bounds, because at the high school, kids are on that field all the time, and it's such a positive thing in their lives. So that's, if because of the circumstances, I think it's an ideal place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I turn it over to my colleagues, I've got one other, I'm not sure it's a question, it is a concern. We've just installed a synthetic turf field at high school, and that was done within the last year. If we were to go ahead on a rather expeditious basis in installing a second turf field, 15 years from now, in a very short period of time, the town would be faced with replacing 2 carpets within a very short period of time at not an insignificant cost. I think it's about in current dollars, it's about $400,000 to replace the carpet. So I'm not sure that the town has resolved how we're going to do that. It's just a concern that I have.
And I would just add that, just to put that number in dimension for people who are unaware, our goal as a town is to spend approximately $2 million in capital every year. And rarely are we able to fund capital to that level. And because we underfunded capital for several years, the backlog of capital projects is pretty extensive. So that sort of adds to the concern Tom raised. Okay, Jim?
How about questions for either me or the school building committee, or
Jim?
Any
questions?
Oh, hey, Tom.
Hi.
So is it my turn? Do you mind if I hog the...
It's you.
Hog the mic for a few minutes? Thanks. So first of all, I want to congratulate the school building committee. You know, volunteering is sometimes a thankless job, and I'm not sure if you've received enough public attention and thanks for all the hard work you've done. It's, you know, we're assuming every project that is given to you now comes in on time and under budget. So that's a high mark to continue to have to meet, but you've done it so far. So thank you. You know, I think one of the reasons we've been able to accomplish so much is we've done it with kind of a Hingham discipline process. It's been a process-oriented program in which we've really thought through every program before we've actually embarked upon it. So as I thought about this and have you know, read all the documentation, watched a bunch of videos of meetings to my children's chagrin, and really thought a lot about this, I've come up with a few things that, in my humble opinion, I believe to be the truth. One is that I'm very satisfied that the long-term cost of turf versus grass is fairly equal. I think they're right in line with one another if you look over an extended time period, including the cost of turf replacement. I think over a 30-year time period, I'm fairly confident the cost is the same. What isn't the same, though, is the cost per unit of activity. You get way more activity on turf than you do grass. It's just, you know, common sense. So in many ways, you can look at turf as a much more economical solution than grass. I'm also satisfied that the school building committee has a legal authority to go ahead with this project. You know, I know there's been some discussion about the contingency and whether or not it's allowable to be used for other programs. I personally am confident and comfortable with the fact that they have the ability to move forward with this project if they so planned. That doesn't mean they should, but it means that they could. I'm also satisfied that this field was never discussed. I take a lot of notes. I document it all. I was part of the middle school process, and I went through every minute. I went through every note I took, and not once was this middle school field discussed. So I do have a couple questions, though, Tom. And I think how I like to approach it, and I don't want to dominate the time here, I want to kind of put the turf question aside. I've got a couple of questions about the original plan as it sits forth. So I haven't seen yet the expenses for the actual project expenses for building the grass fields as is presently incorporated in the middle school. Do you have that number for us? Does anyone have that number?
Ray, do you have what part of the project costs were supposedly the grass?
So it's not a very easy question to answer. There isn't a specific line item in the general contract for the project for construct multi-purpose grass field. There are a number of factors that go into making up the construction of an athletic field, earthwork, components like loam and seed, grading. If we're talking about a baseball field, we're talking about infield mix, you know, things of that nature. The four options and the order of magnitude cost projections that PAR Corporation, our civil engineer of record, put together for the June 24th meeting did include some offsets in some of those order of magnitude cost projections that would essentially deduct out line items that are easily identifiable in the existing contract. What's difficult is the fact that we have a stockpile of loam on the site, and that was intentional. It's intended that we'll use that stockpile of loam when we construct these fields. That means that we don't have to go out and spend money on loam. And as folks know, if they've paid attention for the last year and a half, loam is quite a commodity. It also can't leave the town if it comes from a town property. So the intention is that stockpile of loam will be reused. So there's a savings there essentially, or no extra cost that we would then have to incur. So it's difficult to kind of subtract that out, if you will. There certainly is some material that will go into building a base of an artificial field, but there are also other materials that go into it that are beyond that. So it's not an easy way to get to a simple delta between the two, grass versus synthetic.
Thanks, Ray. And you may want to keep standing for a moment if you don't mind. 'Cause I'm not sure if Tom has the answer to these questions. When you went through the value engineering process with the middle school, you eliminated the irrigation system for the grass fields. You must have put a value to that. Was there a value in you had to drill a well, or how to get water for an irrigation system?
So we eliminated, and Tim, correct me if I say anything that's incorrect. We eliminated the irrigation way early in the process. And let me just reiterate that. I think what I said earlier is that we didn't really spend a whole lot of time on field design at all.
Right.
In fact, I think some folks have looked through scope and budget documents and other documentation to see any mention of fields, and you're not going to find it. And there's a reason why. The focus is on building the school, and that was the project. The reason why we have fields is because we have fields before, and the model which we're following, Whitman-Hanson High School, also has fields. But again, no specific inordinate amount of time was spent on field design, other than to spend a little bit of focus on the baseball field, and just a little bit. We did remove some things, like basketball courts, that were originally proposed by our architect, I think because Whitman-Hanson had them, but I'm not certain, I can't remember. The irrigation was something that quickly came out because the costs were really unknown at that time. We had not really done any hard cost estimates. We had not finished designing the school. In the process of designing the project, we said, you know what, we want to keep costs down. One of the first things that came out was an elevated running track that the Whitman-Hanson High School had. And that was something that we immediately said, we don't need it. It's space and it's money, and it's not appropriate for what we're trying to do here. So there were a number of things. Tom, you'll remember there was a small, we call it a field toilet, a little field house with storage and a toilet. We eliminated that. Getting back to the irrigation, so that came out quickly. If I had to put a number on it, based on my conversations with engineers recently, I think it's around a $50,000 number. I'm not certain, so don't hold me to that. And again, this was during design, so not a firm number at all. I have had, some conversations with the engineer recently, and keeping in mind that under the current design, we're intending to build grass fields. Grass fields need water in order to grow, to thrive, and to be playable on a regular basis for a long period of time. So right now, we have no irrigation planned. If we are not going to move forward with turf, and frankly, either way, I'm going to be tickled pink about this project because I think it's great. It's going to be a great school. The building committee may need to reconsider irrigation. Now that we know where the numbers are falling, and that it seems clear that there's going to be money available.
That would be one of those change orders.
Right, exactly. So if we were to consider that, that would be something we consider in a change order. The other thing I would mention as to irrigation and water is everyone's familiar with the water ban that we recently went through with Aquarium. Certainly that could happen again. That is, unless we own the water company. We'll see about that. I would think that in order to avoid a problem like that in the future, if we were to install irrigation for grass fields at the middle school, we would want to consider as well installing a well. There's a well at the high school. People have asked, hey, why are the sprinklers on at the high school? We have a water ban. We have a well. So that may be something the building committee would want to consider as well. Just getting some numbers from our engineer based on recent projects and similar projects. Just engineering on a well, $3,000 to $5,000. Several $1,000s, as much as $9,000, recently done on a Natick project, just to do a test well to confirm that there's potable water. And then well installation, which is probably $10,000 to $15,000 on top of that. Tom Hoffman can probably speak to what he and the football program and the baseball program in town paid to put the well in at Lynch. So you're looking at an expenditure for that, in addition to the irrigation system on top of that. So, all told, is it a $50,000 number? It's probably more like a $75,000 number in total.
Yep.
That's ballpark.
Now, I know also what's come up is that the field dimensions for the baseball field aren't a dimension that we typically play. So I would imagine also if we were to maintain the turf, the grass, excuse me, that we would also need a kind of new design plans for the fields if they were to include a well and irrigation and maybe newly designed baseball dimensions.
Yeah, if the school building committee was going to talk about irrigation for grass fields, certainly those would need to be incorporated through a change for engineering purposes. The baseball field is something that we haven't even discussed at length in building committee because it only came up recently about the sizing. If there is to be a baseball field in this project, it seems to me personally that we would need to rethink the size of it, since the intended size is not it's not appropriate for any team that plays in town. Right. So there certainly would be some revision to the design. There's existing design, so that's not as involved and time-consuming, just adjusting design. And we've already actually got some preliminary numbers to what kind of credit we could be looking at. It's a small credit, but it certainly wouldn't cost us any more to change the baseball field to a more appropriate size.
Are there any drainage issues in that? Do we know of any yet? Is it too early to tell?
Concerns, you mean?
Yeah, concerns.
There are no concerns. There is a very straightforward, simple drainage plan in the design to be installed with natural grass fields. Involves catch basins at different areas. Obviously, if we were to go forward with turf, it would be a much more intricate drainage system. It certainly doesn't have the drainage concerns that the high school had, at least to my knowledge. Nothing that came up during schematic design or any of the geotechnical studies that were done before we went into our design.
So is that I'm sorry.
Just for reference purposes, in a delta between the middle school versus high school fields, I think the ultimate cost of the synthetic turf portion and drainage was in excess of $900,000 at the high school.
Actually, if you just carve out the 5 major components of the turf field itself for the high school, the carpet, the turf curb, the underlying drainage system, which includes piping, it includes crushed stone, sand, the fence. Is that 4 or 5? I don't know. It's $769,000 was the number for those 5 components, which includes the drainage. Now, there are other drainage components that were part of the field's project at the high school, which led from the turf, the new drainage system for the baseball field, the replacement of that 30-inch pipe under Union Street. So there were other components, but of the 5 major components for the turf at the high school, it was $769.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
And maybe one more, and then we'll...
Okay. I'm going to ask a kind of a broad question. Let's go to the turf field for a moment. If the school building committee chose to move forward with the turf field project, can you walk through the process you would need to undergo then? And any costs associated with planning out part of the planning? Is there conservation committee issues? Is there, other issues you need to address?
Sure. Assuming the school building committee decided to move forward, what would first be needed would be a design. And that would be a specific design for a turf field that could include a couple of options depending on how we discuss it, if we do discuss it. There would need to be a cost estimate, or at least a much more concrete sense of what the actual cost would be to the project. We would need to go back to the planning board to file an amended site plan review. and to the Conservation Commission to amend the order of conditions. And to my knowledge, those are the only two permitting boards we would have to appear before. I did talk to our engineer a little bit, just to get a sense of what something like this might cost if we were to then call him, whether it's tomorrow or September 4th or whenever it is, and say, we'd like you to move forward with a design and a cost estimate. And obviously, in my mind, we would work with our current designer and engineer of record. If we were to move forward with construction of a turf field, on advice of council, I believe that we would likely go out to bid for the construction services for that, rather than make the construction a change order, since it is a large number. And my understanding from procurement laws and our council's experience in the Commonwealth, a change of that size is often frowned upon, and there have been some issues and cases in the past where it's been a problem. So the intention would that we go out to bid separately. We could get, my understanding from our engineer is a design, if we were to pursue it, about 3 to 4 weeks to put together. That would include possible options, and the cost would be approximately $45,000 to $50,000, which would include the permitting process that we would need to go through.
Great, thank you.
Greg? No questions? Okay, Craig?
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. First off, let me also commend the school building committee for a great job. It's not an easy process to go through, and to bring it in for significantly below budget, I think it's a real accomplishment. So thanks for all your hard work doing that. Not going to repeat some of the questions that I had that Jim already got answered, but maybe just a slightly different tact. I don't view really the issue here of being turf versus natural grass. It's really how we get there and how we make the decision. And one of the things I'm concerned about is, and Ray, you just alluded to that, we don't typically have at this point in time the information that we would normally have to make such a decision. We don't have a design. We have gone through Concom and the planning board, but we're going to have to go back to them with amendments, which will have to be dependent on what the new design is. So we're not quite sure yet what variances may be needed. I'm concerned here that we're putting perhaps a little bit the cart before the horse. So what I'd be interested is, since there's not going to be any design available for the September 3rd meeting where the vote's going to be taken, how will the school building committee get to a decision at that point with all these open items?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that yet either, because we need to discuss it more. I would point out that we moved forward on this entire project at town meeting without a specific design and a specific cost estimate. The numbers that were approved at town meeting, the $60,910,920, were based on a space summary of allocated spaces for certain areas and a cost per square foot that was provided to us by the MSBA. In addition, the original schematic design, if you will, came from AI3 and was based specifically, our architect, and was based specifically on the Whitman-Hanson High School to be used as a model. So when we went to special town meeting on October 11, that $60 million number was not based on a cost estimate or any specific design. The cost estimates were done later that fall into the winter. In fact, the last cost estimate was done at the end of March, which is when the construction documents were finalized, and that's when we went out to bid. So the design in the school was not complete when we went to town meeting. We certainly did not have hard cost estimates, and what we based our decision on at town meeting was a guideline, essentially, that it was provided to us by the MSBA. Obviously, this is a little bit different. I think certainly there is an opportunity to to get a design and to get a cost estimate if we wanted to do that. The problem is that in order to do that, the building committee would need to make a decision to move forward and to actually expend dollars to make that happen. And thus far, that's not something we've been, as a group, been interested in doing until this process is complete and we get some feedback from other folks in town.
Just to follow up, Ray, but if the building committee were to decide to go ahead with a design, would that precede any vote on whether or not to install a turf field, or would the installation decision, just to Craig's point, would you say, we're going to install it, now let's design it, or let's design it and get cost estimates, and then let's decide if we want to move ahead?
I think we could do either. I think that the more traditional way is to let's design it, get a cost estimate, and then move forward with installation if we feel that we're happy with the design and the cost estimate is in line with what we expect and anticipate, and certainly would be affordable under our existing contingency budget.
Thanks. Anything else?
Yeah, one other thing.
Before we move on.
Sure.
Tim, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Good evening. Tim Collins, Lantern Lane. I'm the vice chair of the building committee. I've been on the committee since its inception in 2006. Just to the point of a lot of these questions about whether or not the middle school is even the right location. We heard that a second field was planned at the high school, which is a more traditional place for a large fields complex. That was deferred. One of the complicating factors for the building committee to authorize itself to move forward with this turf field upgrade is the only location that we could consider under the appropriation that was made in 2011 is the middle school. And as I expressed and have repeatedly expressed, one of my biggest concerns is the lack of any kind of fields proposal for the town. And that also dovetails with what the chair mentioned in terms of capital expenditure for the town. It's also not clear to me that another turf surface is the next up high priority for the town to the tune of $1 million, $800,000. We could dance around the number all day. And so the very complicated issue that I would have as a member of the building committee is not being able to look at other locations and to bring in other people and get other opinions on whether, for example, I think Lynchfield is lighted. That makes a difference when we talk about usability and how often one can use a turf field. Are we being asked to look at a turf field at the middle school and maybe light it if that's the next best location? And so it becomes a very, very complicated exercise when you ask the building committee, which is only empowered by the town to build a building mostly with fields at a specific site. We actually could not consider all the locations that might be appropriate in town. And I would actually, to that point, I would ask the chair to maybe consider just slightly tweaking the first vote that you proposed, which was whether or not the school building committee should bring the turf field issue to town meeting next spring. I would actually advocate that that vote be whether or not the advocates for a turf field bring that forward. This is not a building committee initiative. Our initiative is to build the school on time and under budget based on the schematics that we brought to town meeting. And so I would suggest that it would be very, very difficult if we authorized ourselves to proceed on this particular issue to fully consider all the appropriate locations in town, because it wouldn't be within our purview. So I think that would be a significantly complicating factor. Thank you.
Thank you. Set with questions? One more?
One last question.
Sure.
In terms of usage, my understanding is that the middle school prior, or the existing middle school, the fields at that school were used for school activities and really not much else?
That's actually not true. And it's terrible that I had to be reminded of this, but after the selectmen's meeting, I was reminded that Hingham Youth Soccer has traditionally and historically used those fields quite significantly. In fact, my own kids played soccer there until they were taken out of service in 2012. Hingham Youth Football certainly used them in August for practice when they were resting the Lynch fields. But in the fall and the spring, Hingham Youth Soccer has historically used those fields for not only its Kickers 1 program, but I think the U12 teams have played and practiced there. So it does get a lot of, historically those fields did get a lot of use beyond just middle school students.
And I know my children played t-ball there, so
which kind of brings the question that comes from that. Another concern is, have the neighbors in the vicinity of the school, in terms of usage of the fields, has it been vetted that perhaps that would be an element of the new school that would be heavier usage of the fields than they were before?
Sure. We did notify, I think, over 30 abutters and neighbors of the series of meetings that we were going through and the discussion that was unfolding. I would note that the Sheehan's, who live on Pine Grove Road, were at the Selectmen's meeting last week. And I have been in contact with David O'Brien, and recently, who also lives on Pine Grove. In fact, sent him the PAR presentation from the June 24th meeting. So a number of them are certainly aware. We, in fact, in the letter that we sent to neighbors and abutters, made it clear that at least one of the options that we were presented with by our engineer suggested moving the area of play further into the boundary between the properties, essentially moving closer to them, just to let them know that was something that could be considered if we were to move forward. I did have a conversation with the Sheehan's, who live on Pine Grove, after the meeting last week. Made it clear to them, certainly, it was mentioned, someone mentioned lights, I don't know who it was, but there's absolutely no intention to put lights here. No one's even discussed that. So we're talking about daytime use, obviously. The increased usage would be opportunities to play when weather is bad and when weather has been bad, where you might have muddy fields a day after the rain, even when the sun is shining. A turf field, as we've learned, you can play on. So there would be increased usage based on that. Obviously, a turf field is an attractive element, and like the high school would present itself with many other opportunities for not only the students to use intramural programs, high school teams, and community youth groups, but it's something that could be managed and really become a true community asset. And so while the usage certainly would, I think, increase, we're not talking about going beyond daylight hours, other than that one possible option that might move things toward the boundary. There's been no suggestion of any activity that would interfere with the neighbors any more than grass fields would.
Jim?
Thank you for building your school. A few questions. I guess the first question I have is deciding whether or not this synthetic turf field is a need or want. I see it more as a luxury item, so as a want as opposed to as a need. So I guess one of the first questions comes up is that whatever the cost might be for this project, putting that next to all the other things that this town is considering in terms of needs, such as refurbishing and upgrading some of our fire equipment, fire facilities, maybe even an extra fire station, and other projects that are coming down. Why would this project take precedence or take money away from those projects that are being considered? The next question I would have is, if we look at the high school field project that was completed, is there a way to determine yet if it was a success or not? And since we can determine from Mrs. Conity and you all that the use of it is a success, but in terms of dollars, which this committee considers quite often, is there a way to determine at this point, is it successful? I don't know if those numbers are available yet to have. So maybe you can speak to that right now.
I just want to,
Oh, sure.
Sorry. Tim Collins again. On your point about whether or not it's a luxury item, clearly the youth of America needs to get moving, maybe be a little skinnier than myself. Whether or not that needs to be done on turf or other surfaces is certainly up for debate when you put it in the context of the town's needs. I think something that would signal to us whether or not it's a luxury item is if you look at the MSBA regulations on reimbursable items, there's three categories. There are generally reimbursable. They don't make any promises as to what might be guaranteed reimbursable, but there's generally reimbursable. There's might be reimbursable, and there's a category called categorically ineligible. In that list, you will find turf fields, athletic complexes, etc. And I think what that tells you is that while affluent towns that have the money to build turf fields and things, those are tremendous assets. I don't disagree with anyone who's suggested that those are great assets for youth sports. I think they're clearly luxury items. Maybe someday in the future when the costs come down and the environmentals are perfect and the replacement costs are very manageable, maybe they'll be considered more of a regular item, but the fact that they're categorically ineligible and that this would be 100% burden on the town would suggest maybe that this is a nice to have. I'm not opposed to nice to have. I actually, in my personal capacity, supported the high school field project, but there are other things, and that's, again, one of my concerns, is that there is no roadmap that the building committee could look to that says not only is a turf surface the next priority, it's a turf surface at the middle school. And so all of those other concerns are out there in terms of capital expenditure. $1 million is a lot of money in my book.
And Tim, I would just add, and I don't disagree with what you said, but also another way to look at it is that, the MSBA is in the business of kind of making schools.
Right.
Building schools, and they only have $500 million every year, and my guess is that the school communities that are requesting dollars is probably more than $500 million. So they're also kind of trying to spread the money around as much as possible to make sure that that the students across the Commonwealth have desks and a classroom that's a suitable size and science equipment that's current. So, I think there are a couple ways to look at it. I would also say that, to your point, we should just clarify that, what's not on the table here is we can't say, we're going to take this contingency money and, go over here and renovate a fire station. We don't have the ability, but I think Jim makes a good point, which is, at a certain point, every taxpayer has a threshold about how much they want to pay and how much they're willing to pay. And if we're spending, if a taxpayer is spending money on this project, that might take away money from another project that comes down the road. So I don't disagree with what anyone said. I just wanted to add a couple things.
Let me add something here. So today, going through some of the letters and comments that were sent to us, I did a little bit of the last minute of the hour being in my office, a little research. And I went back to the minutes of the meeting back in 2011, specifically September 22nd, 2011, which was just prior to the vote for the new middle school. And if remind some of you or refresh your memory, there was a lot of contention and apprehension about the price that was being floated. So much so that some of the members of this town came up with an alternative. Not to say that that was the best choice, but in my opinion, a reaction to the price that was being proposed. In doing so, there was a lot of discussion by this committee and discussion with you, Ray, and your committee as well. And even to the point, in the minutes it stated, there was an update in which John Asher had went back to the MSBA and wanted a clarification. If we didn't go forward with the project, what would happen? The MSBA came back and said, you have 120 days to make a new proposal, otherwise you go back to the very beginning of the whole process. In the notes, or in the minutes, let me just read what was put in and voted as accepted. Based in part on the response, the Board of Selectmen voted to support the MSBA middle school article as presented. It was further noted that the Selectmen, School Committee, and School Department have all agreed in principle that if construction bids come in lower than anticipated, and any savings identified during the bidding process were not to be used to restore components of the model middle school design that were removed as part of the value engineering process undertaken by the school building committee and the project engineers. So according to the minutes, if I read that right, any savings should not be for projects to put back into the school.
Let me clarify that,
Sure.
Jim, because I sort of looked at the same thing. As you pointed out, when there was some sticker shock, and when the value engineering exercise was done, there were cuts that were this painful, there were cuts that were this painful, and there were cuts that were this painful. And the agreement between the Board of Selectmen, the school committee, and the school building committee was if the bids came in lower, the things that were cut wouldn't be added back. So that's why there aren't basketball courts out there That's why the auditorium has 20 fewer seats. And I actually think the building committee should be commended for having the discipline to follow through on the commitment that they made. Now, now that there's money left, I think we just need to understand that this is something we're adding back, but it wasn't something that was there in the first place. So I would say the building committee is still has delivered on the commitment it made. It's now saying, now that we have these available funds and we have this new need, are we interested in it?
Well, I guess I take these minutes, these notes, as well as what was sent to us about what the definition of the contingency fund was sent to us, as this was money that was saved and thus, at some point, if not spent, would be given back to the town and not to be spent at the discretion of a school building committee or school department, that it would be back in the town's funds. And add to that the whole exercise we went through last year, which was to reduce the debt burden, which would translate into a reduction of, or slowing of the increase of real estate taxes to this town, that this is kind of going in the reverse direction of what we tried to do last year. So that's part of the reason why I bring this up. I just, a few other comments if I'd like. I find the reasoning for this field is because I hear all the time is that there's a lack of fields. And I'm wondering, is it a lack of fields at all times, or is it a lack of fields at a specific time? I drive by a lot of fields at different times, and not during the school day, obviously the students are in school, but even on weekends where I see a lot of empty fields at a lot of times. So my question is, to do this project, to have field space availability when it was already available, I question that reasoning. A second comment or note, I wonder if, I guess let me ask this in way. You being on the school building committee, you being also as a member of the school committee, and also a coach of a town team which is in partnership with the school partner, school sports partner, the sports partnership of Hingham. Do you find that there might be some reason that people would perceive a conflict of interest here with decisions that are being made?
So I have no idea what folks would perceive from that.
Jim, I'm just going to interrupt and ask if that's really germane to the discussion and the votes that we have tonight. I understand the point you're making, and I respect where you're coming from, but I'm kind of thinking about the decisions ahead of us here and wondering whether that's a question for a different setting.
I guess I'm questioning a project which we don't know the scope of, but a significant amount of money is being brought before us, and considering why and who's bringing it before us and why.
So, Madam Chair,
would you like to maybe speak to, and could you maybe speak to the events that triggered this being brought forward? Because I think it's important to note that while Ray is the public face of this, that he is speaking on behalf of requests that he's received.
That's right. Thank you.
Briefly.
So I do serve on the school committee and honored to serve on the building committee. But I'm not standing here today in either of those capacities. I'm a private citizen. I'm significantly involved in this community on a number of different levels and have been since I moved to town 9 years ago. I was approached because folks know me to be involved in those two committees, starting back last fall when we were opening the turf at the high school. And I would see folks on the sideline at games, practices, at other town events. Hey, how's things going? Oh, this is great. How's the middle school going? How's the, you coming in on time? How's the money? I would fill them in on some brief details. And, hey, this turf, particularly after the high school turf opened, boy, this turf is just great. Is there any way we can get this at the middle school? Now, folks made that comment and asked that question to me. I'm not talking about 1 or 2 or 10. Hundreds of folks in this town have approached me at different times over the last 9 months and asked just that question. It got to a point last December where I brought it to the rest of the school building committee to consider. We discussed it. Folks had some knee-jerk reactions to it. There was a lot of unknowns at the time, and the consensus was that we did not feel comfortable considering it at that time because it suggested using contingency funds that are, in our minds, earmarked for change orders, some of which were unknown at that time. We did not know what we were going to uncover during demolition. And demolition was still several months away at that point in December. So we tabled it. In my mind, depending on what folks said to me over time, either the issue would go away or perhaps it would be revisited as we got closer to the end of our construction and demolition of the old school. The issue did not go away. Folks continued to approach me over the winter. You'll recall that this spring, the weather was terrible. There was a tremendous amount of rain. Practices and games for youth sports in particular were canceled left and right. There was a period of time, it was more than a week, I want to say 2 weeks in April, where the only playable field in town was the artificial turf at the high school. Margaret Connolly will tell you that no games had to be canceled at the high school because of that turf. We did not have to go out and rent facilities, Cohasset or someplace else. We were able to use our own facility even when the weather was so bad. The youth sports did not have, were not as lucky, and they did have to go out and use other facilities and spend additional money. The folks that I encountered over the spring continued to ask me, how's the project going? I hear it's way under budget. There were things in the paper at that point. Is there any way we could get turned? Can you talk to the committee? Can you suggest it? Can you do something? So I again brought it to the committee's attention in early June and suggested that perhaps we could take another look at it as we were getting closer to the point where we would be doing demolition and would be more comfortable with some of the unknowns that we didn't know, were going to be there or not. Certainly, as we've gone forward with demolition, there has been some environmental remediation necessary, some of which we knew up front and budgeted for. There have been some additional things uncovered, but luckily, thus far, the costs for those have been low. So, thus far, we've not uncovered any huge unexpected expenditure, and as a result, the contingency fund remains largely intact. On a regular basis, daily, weekly, folks continue to approach me to ask about this. Certainly there's support, I think, in the audience here. You received some letters and some correspondence, emails, calls. Certainly I get them at times at home as well, both in favor and against the idea of doing this. I've seen a number of those. I've seen a handful of folks who have a concern about this, and they have very real concerns, and they're not to be dismissed. And that's why we're going through this process of discussing it. But I will tell you that the folks in support of this who have urged me to get the school building committee to consider this there are hundreds of people in this town. Hundreds of people.
I guess, thank you, Ray. I guess the last comment right here, and I'll leave it to the rest of the committee, is in consideration of whatever this project is, whatever the cost might be, ranges from $600,000 to $1 million. I would think that we look at this not only as what is good economically for the town feasible, but how this affects individuals as well. Remember, there are people that pay for assets in this town they don't use or don't have the chance to use, whatever the case may be, so that this has an impact on the individual as well as the town.
I think I remember a statistic that I think fewer than 25% of Hingham households have students in the public school system. Now, obviously, you have other people using facilities, but you bring up a good point, especially in light of the significant investment in school facilities that the town has made over the past 5 years. Thank you. Linda?
Yes. I also would love to congratulate the school building committee for 2 wonderful projects. I think that you should be very proud of what you've done for the town, and we should all be very, very thankful. 2 great projects on time and under budget. You need a parade. I have one concern, and I was concerned that we didn't have at least an estimate number for the amount of money that would go into the grass field and possible irrigation, if we could figure that out. Because I do think we're throwing around this $600,000, $800,000, $1 million for the turf field, but we also have to remember that if we did a grass field, whatever that number is, and we'll just throw out $300,000, we wouldn't be spending on a grass field, so that could actually be deducted from what the turf field would cost, because it would be a number that would automatically being spent anyway. So that would have been helpful. My question is, and you talked about the typical way this process would go if you voted to move forward on September 3rd was you would begin the process and get design and then go through and then decide, once you've got better numbers, whether to go forward and actually do this. My question is, what do you think, what are we going to lose if you do that? I mean, what is the timeline? Are we going to be really behind schedule? Is it going to put us, another year without, I mean, what are we going to lose if you do that route? And again, not saying you're definitely going to do the turf field, just to start the process, get the design, go to the planning board, and maybe, something will come up at the planning board and you're going to go, we can't do it, and now we're going back to plan, the first one.
Sure, thanks, Lana. First, I'd just like to point out there, so Tim Collins is the vice chair of the building committee. Samantha Anderson is also in the room. Rob Busey and I joined the building committee. We were appointed in 2011. The other 5 members have been on this committee since 2006 and have done a tremendous job on both of those projects. But I would also add on refurbishing Plymouth River School and Foster Elementary to the tune of $7 million in the aggregate. So it was actually, they were working on those at the same time as they were working on the East School project. And Alan McDonald, the former chair, they all did a tremendous job way before I came on the scene. So I certainly join you in commending them for their past work. With respect to schedule, and just to point out, so Tim Collins is here, Samantha Anderson, missing tonight, I think, Peter Bradley, Stefan Vogelman, Sandra Cleary, and Rob Busey, as I mentioned. With respect to schedule, the current contract calls for the grass fields, work on that to start this fall and to be completed in the spring of 2015. But then 2 growing seasons would be necessary, so play on those fields would not be anticipated before the spring of 2016. That's the simplest. Some argue that you actually need 3 growing seasons in order to get the root zones to take well, so you don't ruin them and have to come back and reseed or sod or whatever. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not an engineer. Greg may know a better answer. I don't know. It's at least 2 growing seasons. So we're looking at the spring of 2016 before any fields at the middle school would be available if they're all natural grass. With an artificial turf field, if we were to move forward with this, and let me just point out, some folks have referred to this as middle school fields project. This is not a separate project that anyone has proposed. We've really discussed the possibility of an additional feature as part of the existing middle school project. So I don't want folks to get the wrong impression that this is a whole new project that has legs of its own. The schedule for turf, if we were to decide to go forward as soon as September 3rd, for instance, design and cost estimate will be needed, going back to the planning board and conservation, so the engineer said 3 to 4 weeks for design, so you're into October. Planning and conservation, presumably that schedule in October. 1 or 2 meetings, not sure. It's a fairly straightforward amendment to both permitting routes with those boards. Plus, they've just gone through an official turf project, so it's not the first time they're going to be seeing it. And some of the project manager on the high school fields project, in addition to being civil engineer record on the middle school project. So moving forward with the permitting, October into November, perhaps they could start to prepare things in November before it got too cold, frost, who knows when the snow is going to come, that's an unknown. Certainly construction on an artificial turf field can be completed in the spring and would be available, I'm told, given that kind of loose schedule, by June 2015. So certainly that's nearly a year in advance of when natural grass fields will be available. If it were to be delayed, some suggested, so town meeting approval next week would mean that none of this could happen before that. So that would then start the clock with the design, theoretically, unless the building committee somehow decided to move forward with the design pending town meeting approval. I don't know. We haven't discussed that. So starting in town meeting the end of April, you would then start the clock design, 4 weeks, permitting another month or so, then construction. So you're looking at June. It's the fall, which was suggested when the turf would be available. So essentially, 4 months or so later than if we were to move forward sooner. And then obviously if you're going with grass, we're looking at 2016 when the fields would be available before that. So, if we were to delay things a little bit in terms of, waiting to do a design, maybe doing a design first before making a decision to move forward, seeing what a cost might be. Maybe we wouldn't be able to start any work this fall. It would have to wait until the spring to start. It could still be completed in the spring and be available June-ish, July. So it would certainly save time over the town meeting. The town meeting, I think, would certainly put us in a position where, and not a position that we weren't anticipating, mind you. The design has grass fields, and we knew that they wouldn't be available to 2016. Because money is available in the budget, and there is an opportunity to do this, this would allow us to give the kids something sooner.
Anything else? No. Okay, thank you. Donna?
I'd just like to clarify, I understand that the dollars are soft at this point, the sign, but it's my understanding that the range that the consultants ballparked at the June meeting netted out savings that they could easily identify for the grass field. And so the dollars that we're talking about are, in effect, increasing cost over the grass field rather than, okay.
And I think, Ray, just correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what Ray was saying is those are net costs to the extent they can be identified.
Yes.
There may be additional costs that would not be incurred that have yet to be identified. So it's as net as they can get.
Can I also just clarify one thing too? So, your comment that if you just to pick a number, you said 300,000 for grass. No, it doesn't. It's not putting real numbers.
But yeah, if Don's...
It's not. Can we have the Chevy or the Cadillac? And if we get the Cadillac, we don't spend the money on the Chevy. The contractor has told the current contractor of record, who we have a signed contract with, has to do work in accordance with the contract this fall. So certain things have to be done to preserve the rejuvenated fields when the whole building comes down. So there are costs that have to be incurred. And as you mentioned, some of the estimate that Park prepared identified some costs that we could probably get back. But as Ray mentioned, on advice of our project council, this would highly likely have to be bid, and it's therefore at least uncertain, if not unlikely, that the current contractor would be the person awarded the turf fields. So you can imagine a scenario where if the current contractor won the bid, there would be a much greater ability to give some concessions here and take them back over there. If you imagine a second contractor in a low bid scenario being awarded that turf field contract, the first contractor, for very obvious reasons, has very little incentive to give back much of anything other than easily identifiable costs. So I think it's actually a very good statement to look at the numbers in that PAR presentation, although they're very, very soft. And one thing that keeps getting missed is that in December, the same engineering firm put a $1.3 million proposal on the table, which equates to like proposal 3 in June, which is now $500,000 less. I'm not sure where that $500,000 discount came from, but it's a virtually identical proposal by the same engineering firm that's $500,000 less. So the costs are very soft, but I think the high school would instruct us that it's somewhere between $700,000 and $1 million if you don't have big environmental impact. But the concept of real savings from one to use on the other is very, very dicey at best, because you're highly likely to have two contractors involved.
And I think this committee just wants to make sure that we understand the incremental cost of moving from grass to turf, as opposed to the absolute cost. So, yes.
It's not pure.
Yes.
There's definitely a bleed over. And so you're likely to have, even if if the middle school is the right place to put the next turf surface, you'd still have to do certain things this fall to sort of preserve the work that the contractor's done. They also want to finish up their contract, and if the fields are taken away from them, they want to finish their work and get paid and go to the next project.
Yeah. Thank you. Lucy, and I know we still have a few folks to ask questions, and just in interest of time, we're approaching 9 o'clock, and I do want to make sure we have an opportunity for questions and additional questions and comments from members of the public who came as well. So, Lucy?
I'm wondering when final demolition will be complete?
I don't know the answer to that. Demolition started, there was some preparation for demolition that was begun toward the end of June, around June 30th. Demolition in earnest began on July 7th. Under the contract, it's a 20-week demolition period. I don't think any of us expects that it'll be 20 weeks. Certainly our project manager has indicated that that is obviously a conservative number. But until our contractor is an aggressive contractor, he wants to get this done early for us. For instance, the bus loop is not intended to be completed until Thanksgiving. We really wanted him to complete the bus loop before school opened on September 2nd. He's been really working hard to try to do that. At this point, it does not appear he's going to be able to, but he's still trying. So it's hard to answer that question, because I don't know if it's going to end up being the full 20 weeks, or if he gets the demolition done in 16 weeks, or it's 13 weeks, or it's 17 weeks.
But do you anticipate any further need for contingency funds related to demolition?
I can't answer that either. I don't know. Until things are uncovered, and for instance, a couple of weeks ago, things were uncovered, and you don't know until you open up the building, and you see something from a 1962 building, and you have to deal with it. So I can't answer that question. We won't know until we actually are finished.
And Ray, I want to confirm some numbers that might get at Lucy's question. $1.7 million remaining in available contingency?
It's actually, right now, based on the budget, I think you have a budget from July 19th.
Yes.
Tomorrow night, the building committee meets, and we'll have an updated budget. I've seen a preliminary document. The only number that really changes too much is the expended amount of the contingency line item, but it's still below $500,000. There certainly are anticipated dollars that are going to come from contingency, and those are in the form of, almost certain ineligible expenses deemed that way by the MSBA. For whatever reason, there's a whole host of categories of items that they do not reimburse and deem ineligible. And there certainly could be, and I expect would be, other change orders. We've approved 10 change orders to date, just under $500,000.
One more question, and that is, if this decision gets postponed because you don't have the information you need, or someone says we're going to go to the town meeting and discuss fields in general, what will be done with the property that would be the fields in terms of temporarily preparing it for something?
Sure. Well, as Tim suggested, the contractor would need to prepare it in some way. We'd obviously have to give direction as to what that would be. I would expect that if we're going to postpone a decision, but yet still consider turf at a future time, that we would not want to spend money on improvements that are just going to be torn up, potentially. So I think preserving the area would need to be done at the very least. I'm not sure exactly what that would entail.
Tom?
Since most of my questions have already been addressed, I just have one more, and that is, should this move forward to synthetic, my concern is 15 years out, and the revenue model that I'm familiar with from recreation would be to cover what's called rehabilitation, such as Cronin Field redoing the infield and so forth. So paying for the replacement of the carpet, I can't figure out any other way to do that as a businessman other than to use come from user fees. I don't know how realistic that is, because whether that makes it participation not affordable, or is there a limited town contribution that should be made for that?
Again, I don't think there's a really good answer for that. I can tell you that the school committee has considered this on a limited basis with respect to the high school turf field. Some have suggested, okay, it's built now, it's being used 15 years from now, or perhaps less. The likelihood is the carpet's going to need to be replaced, and if you're going to maintain an asset like that, you would do that. We've talked about whether it would be possible to set aside a fund, a maintenance fund now, to begin that. We've been told that that's not necessarily, that's likely not possible, although we're exploring some options. I would suggest, though, for that field, and if there were, whether it's a turf field or grass fields constructed at the middle school, that those are assets that belong to the town, that the town should be maintaining, and if it's the school committee or the recreation commission or whomever is charged with that maintenance responsibility to ensure that that's done. Certainly the school committee submits a capital request as part of its budget submission each year, and as part of our operating budget, the school committee has maintenance line items. We also have revolving accounts, which you suggested, user fees, essentially revolving accounts, which we can also use to defray maintenance costs. We actually pay some salaries for some maintenance folks out of those various revolving accounts. I would suggest personally that as a town asset, that the town should be involved in not only preserving that asset, and however that might be, whether it's through the budget of the committee that's charged with its maintenance, or in some other way, whether it's a separate user fee or what have you. But also that if there's replacement costs down the road, that's something that would need to be considered as a capital expenditure. And if you're talking a considerable dollar amount, whether it's $450,000 or whatever, that may be something that can't be carried in an operating budget, nor may it be taken care of out of our town capital budget. As Mary pointed out, we've been able to fund things at $2 million. Borrowing $1.2 million to purchase two fire engines, I believe. That's a capital expenditure that the town made, and it's doing in the way of issuing bonds, that it felt was a prudent decision to move forward with to maintain its assets. And over time, a turf field would be a similar asset that I would imagine the town would need to consider how to fund the maintenance and replacement of that, whether it's through the capital plan, whether it's through a committee operating a capital budget, or it's through some other vehicle like borrowing.
And I think Tom Piles alluded to that earlier on, as it's a little bit of an open-ended question, because while there are savings in maintenance every year, typically there are other parts of our budgets that increase that kind of eat up those savings. So it can be a little tricky. Ted.
will caveat by saying that I actually am leaning towards and being approval and saying, I think we should build this in terms of proposed turf field. But I think we need to go back and assess what was being brought forward initially. And so one is to ask, did we really vote on something that we did not have plans for? I think it's an advisory committee
I
right here.
would maybe take a stab at answering that to Anthony. So when we went forward, it was a school program where there were plans, there were initial designs, and I actually think that what town meeting approved was based on some pretty rigorous work, because it went through a really rigorous hearing process, and citizens were also presented with an alternative. And I actually think that upped the ante on, the degree of analysis and looking at the project. In the scope of a $60 million project, we said, you know what, we had a school here and fields here. We're going to take the area where there used to be the fields and put the school. We're going to take the fields that used to be there and put them where the school was. And that was all the discussion. Now, I think what you're bringing up is that some citizens have come forward and said, because turf wasn't explicitly mentioned and because turf has been somewhat of a controversial, attention-getting topic in the town, there is a feeling that this represents a change in scope that is not in keeping with the spirit of town meeting. So that's one point of view. Then I think there's another point of view that says town meeting approved a dollar amount. And town meeting said, building committee, go spend it, don't exceed it. And so others would take the position that when they gave that approval to town meeting, it was implied that the school building committee had the discretion to do this. And I don't think you can find anywhere, I don't think there's going to be a document or anything that's going to say, gosh, it comes down clearly on this side. I think, in some cases, we may need to agree to disagree on that.
Well, I mean, and part of it too is just to say, I don't think that everything that would happen in terms of a building project like this is something that has to come back to the town. And so I think that is why we trusted in our neighbors and folks who know the field, know the industry, know what they're doing. But I do have to question the decision because I believe we go down this slippery slope of, and Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, what you said is, I am here personally simply to say my job is to get this project done under budget and on time, hopefully early. So if it's not the building committee that's actually proposing the change from grass to turf, and what we've seen in terms of both looking at the video from the Board of Selectmen meeting last week, or I think Ted even said in the meeting there that in discussions with town council that the building committee does have the discretion to do whether it's contingency fund or surplus funds. My thought is, well, the building committee, and I think you said earlier, the building committee is not voted on this yet. The building committee is not even bringing the school. So I guess my question is, who is, right? I imagine the answer would be several hundred citizens, which to me probably would be one of those. But I also would have to say we have to look at what was intended. And I think considering the amount of diligence we've done, and I've done on this committee, just in the last year, I don't see the town of Hingham, the town to go forward and spend $60 million. We're having some kind of defined sense of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it.
I do think on this field question, the field surface was not discussed because at that time, we didn't have turf anywhere in Hingham, and we were about a year out from Ward Street with the proposal for a synthetic turf field that generated a lot of controversy and that failed. I mean, if I was putting forth a middle school project during very tough economic times, when we had just built East School, the last thing I'm going to do is throw a synthetic turf surface in there that at that time was kind of a third rail. So I think there's general acceptance that the surface was not contemplated because we as a town had not evolved to that. So it's kind of assumed to be grass.
The construction funds indicated it's grass.
Well, I mean, I would imagine if you were looking at the budget proposal, if we say the difference between turf and grass is 800 and 300, if we just use that rough number, then you can look at the numbers in 2011 and somebody will be able to say, there's no way that is a turf field based upon the cost. So regardless of it's in the plan or not, they have to be assuming that was going to look built down. I'm not trying to argue legal points. I simply think it is a matter of, and like I said, I think my preference would be to build it. But having said that, I think we do need to ask, and mine is not just looking at this project, the project looking forward, which is, if you said you're going to we're going to make a circle. That is my kind of, yes, I want to be able to assign and delegate it in terms of the folks who should be doing the work. But I think there has to be a sense of kind of the committee and the town feeling like we're all on the same page on this, and this is what we're voting on. And not that we're taking a sharp left turn. That is my concern. And I think I do think the numbers would tell you and so I guess I'll pause you that, Ray, to kind of respond to my question.
Right, that, the proposal that was before town meeting did not contemplate artificial turf. But it wasn't specific about grass fields either. It wasn't specific about any fields. You mentioned, town meeting experience, who spoke, PowerPoints, things of that nature. My recollection is the only PowerPoint may have been Ted's, which was a tax impact calculation, and maybe looking at debt service at that point. I was the first person to get up and speak on behalf of Article 5, which was the model middle school article. There was no visual behind it at all. There were no boards, no PowerPoint. There was never any visual put in front of folks at the meeting for the current time. Certainly there were, as design progressed, certainly there were visuals, and then certainly when we went through permitting, a lot of that was publicized significantly. But there was really not much discussion at all about incidentally, at that same meeting, we did vote to approve phase 1 of the high school fields project, which was refurbishing of the track and tennis courts, and also funding for phase 2, which to do design, which was to include an artificial turf field at the high school. So the town was just beginning to consider that after an ad hoc committee had spent a year and 25 public meetings and tons of time, obviously, looking at the issue, and there was more work beyond that. But there was nothing really specifically discussed in that town meeting at all about anything else.
Just looking at maybe the spirit of town meeting, is if we all agree, and Ray, if you said it, I'm going to agree with you on it, which is we went to a vote on $60 million, which is more than half of our expenditure for this year, if you look at our budget. And we went to it without a design. It seems to me like there was a lot of trust in here. And I don't mean to say that we were going in and simply writing a blank check, that we were writing a blank check. But I think in the spirit of the town basically saying, yes, we think it's a great idea, we need it in terms of what we're going to develop, is that if we go down the road now of simply, and I guess at some point we would have to have a building committee vote to even tell us you're voting to actually go to a turf field versus grass, because your plan right now is to finish grass, and those you either go with town council, who told you or can tell you that you have the discretion to spend the money and go to turf, is that going forward, and I personally speaking as a citizen, if there's any plan that's brought before me, I would have to be thinking about, I want to see more details, because I don't want to be in a position later on where I thought we were doing this, and now I don't have the ability to question, because if we conclude the town council is going to say that the building committee has discretion on the spending, I might be a little bit more holding off on my vote before I see a little bit more detail behind it.
Thank you. Quickly to that, so that we can get other two questions covered. Town council has concluded that the school building committee has the legal authority to make this decision. And I think you're bringing up a point that has been raised in some of the correspondence we've received, which is that if there are citizens who feel like choices were made that were different than what they approved, that might set a precedent in terms of how town meeting evaluates future projects, and that could collectively impact all town boards and committees. And I think it's a point that's been raised within some of our correspondence. Dan?
I guess it's being the new kid on the block, it really is tough because all the good questions are gone and all the good comments have already been made. But I will, excuse me, reiterate one that I think is very important. I congratulate the school building committee and the school committee and the town for the good stewardship of our money. This town has done a great job of managing the capital and also at the same time maintaining a very high credit rating, which translates into that 2% borrowing cost. But we got to that position because all of these different bodies in town have spent a lot of time on budgeting, on transparency, on setting priorities, and careful risk assessment. And I recall, if I recall correctly, when we were talking about the middle school, the risk assessment was the question of if we deferred and went with a remodeling or any other program, we were in the risk that we weren't going to get the state funding. And that was a very significant, huge amount of money. And we identified that and said that risk is too great for us to take. And therefore, the town voted to proceed and to go forward with the program that we have before us. So I guess using that rule of thumb, and again, building on the risk question, I guess my question is, what's the risk of going back to town meeting and asking town meeting to affirm, a turf field, or going back and following the same process, budgeting, transparency, priority setting, and then presenting that to the town? I'm not sure I understand what the risk is of doing that.
Thanks, Dan. I guess potentially the risk is expending dollars for something that we may intend to tear up later, although that's only a possibility, but also really the delay. And the delay would be prolonging the time where there would be nothing available for the kids at the school to use, at least a portion of it. And certainly if there was a consideration of a design that incorporated a turf and a baseball field, and it wasn't clear if that was going to move forward, and folks held off, and we held off on that, then there could be, I would think, a very small portion, perhaps, of playing fields actually completed and put on a schedule so that something might be available in the spring of 2016, whereby if you wait until town meeting next year, you're certainly, I think, delaying the availability of those fields longer.
Very, very brief.
Yeah, very brief.
And it's
I would
to
just
answer the question
absolutely.
and not talk for an opinion.
Yes, understood. I made the exact same point the first time it was brought to our committee in December of 2013. I would recommend you check the minutes out. It was brought to us. The cost estimate was $1.3 million, and I said, I don't think this is for our committee. Town meeting is coming up. The warrant is open. Advisory could weigh in. Selectmen could weigh in. Even a non-binding resolution. And various people do not have an interest in that. I think that was an excellent point and would have already been perhaps addressed this past April.
Eric?
Like Dan, I'm also a new kid on the block here, so I started by doing my diligence and doing my homework and learning as much as I could about this issue. And to be honest, the first thing I learned about it, which came as a surprise to me, is that the middle school is this far under budget, and like the others, I think that the school building committee and all the folks who have touched this middle school project over time deserve a very hearty slap on the back. Personally, I was thrilled to learn that, and I commend all of you for bringing it this far, so close to home. I'm very excited to see the finished project next week. So, like my colleague, Mr. Joyce, one of the things that kind of stuck out to me as a concern is, well, what exactly was on the table in October 2011? What did that town meeting vote for? So last Friday morning, I went to the school department, and Dr. Galo and her staff were kind enough to set me up in a conference room, let me go through some documents from the summer and autumn of 2011 to understand what the conversation looked like back then. And I guess this is going to be a question for Mr. Estes, because I think I understand the process in 2011 a little differently, and I want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding. As I understand, the town submitted a scope and budget proposal that the architect AI3 had put together in August of 2011. Do I understand that correctly?
That's correct.
And that in September of 2011, The state, after receiving that package, sent the town a proposed contract that actually incorporated and attached substantial portions of that scope and budget package. Is that right?
Okay. So, just really quickly, yeah, we're running a little. What? Help us out. What are you interested in finding out?
Again, I want to understand what exactly the scope of the project was in October 2011, based on the conversations that had occurred between the town and the State Building Authority.
So I'm a lawyer also, and that sounded a lot like cross-examination. So.
I just attribute it to the lateness of the hour and first meeting of the year.
Right. Let me just suggest that this is the project scope and budget submission that's dated August 19th, 2011, which Mr. Haskell reviewed last week. In here is a two-page response from the MSBA dated September 21st of the same year. You're exactly right that this was the submission by our architect, which was to encompass what the project was to be. There's no specificity in here as to athletic fields. You look at the design on the front, it actually does show athletic fields, but this is the design I think folks in this room have seen probably 100 times over the last few years, but there is no mention of it, and I think Mr. Haskell would concur with that.
I think we've well established that that grass field was within the kind of within the scope, in the sense that the fields that were being used to as the place to construct the new building would be replaced in the space occupied by the old school. So I don't know, Eric, if you have a follow-up on that, or.
I mean, I guess I just want to be clear. I was thrown for a loop by the concept that there wasn't a specific design and a specific cost estimate on the table in 2011.
For the field?
For the middle school project.
So there's a process, okay? And the process when you work with the MSBA and AI3, our architect, had done it many, many times before. Mary Mahoney of Knight Baggy and Anderson, our project manager, had done it many, many times before. She's represented us as project manager on the high school and South School projects back in '99 and 2000, and also on the East School project that was completed in 2009. AI3 was the architect on the East School project as well. AI3 has been the designer of many schools that the MSBA has gone through the MSBA process, including schools designated as models. Mary Mahoney incidentally worked on the Hanson School, upon which our school was modeled. So we have folks who have been through the process with the MSBA countless times. And the process is that you, and it's now changed, and in fact there is no model middle school program with the MSBA anymore. But the process starts with schematic design. Then the MSBA wants to know that the town is invested in pursuing the project, and that investment they're looking for is a town meeting vote and a promise to cover the cost, at least the cost that won't be reimbursed by the MSBA. Based on a guideline of square footage and cost per square footage, the MSBA then comes up with, and a number of different factors, comes up with a rate of reimbursement and financial aspects of the town, a rate of reimbursement, and then it's determined what the cost for the project will be and what the cost that the taxpayers of the town will have to incur by themselves. At that point, when you have schematic design, you then go forward with a more concrete design and cost estimates. And there are levels of cost estimates. There's 60% cost estimate, 90% cost estimate, and then finally 100% cost estimate, which is done at the time construction documents are finalized, just before you go out to bid. In this case, all of those cost estimates and the final design was not completed until after that scope and budget submission, until after the MSBA responded in September of 2011. And the cost estimates were done, in fact, the final cost estimate was done in March of 2012, just before going out to bid. So the numbers that went before town meeting, I didn't mean to suggest that it was based on no design at all. Certainly there was schematic design, that was based on guidelines from the MSBA and a model school upon which we were following. There was no specific concrete design because after the town meeting vote, the school building committee spent a tremendous amount of time honing the design of that building and its attributes over several months. That is the design that went and was estimated. The cost was estimated for, went out to bid at the end of March 2012, and subsequently started construction in June.
We can get the answers to what you're looking for. I just want to make sure that we process this appropriately.
No, I'm happy to keep moving here. I had a couple questions about the current, or maybe the pre-construction usage of the middle school fields. Maybe Ms. Conity is the right person to speak to them, but I don't know. I wanted to make sure that I'm correct in understanding that the middle school doesn't have interscholastic teams right now. Is that right?
And I think in a previous question, the fields, besides the use for the school, were used for soccer and for baseball and t-ball and for football.
Which was not part of the middle school program.
Sure.
Right, we don't have any scholastic at the middle school, but there is an intramural program that would be extensive if the fields are appropriate. In speaking with physical education teachers, they always felt that whatever field they had got beat up because we have such an extensive youth program in the town. And so the fields were not what we would like them to be.
Is there a concern at this point, or isn't there a concern that the intramural club program has stretched the grass field at the middle school to its capacity?
I think it would. If there were more intramural sports, oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that stands to reason. I think it's part of our conversation tonight is the cost of a grass field versus synthetic. I mean, that's your initial cost, but you have to understand, grass is only going to take you so far, and then that has to be replaced, and that has to be rested and taken offline. That's a problem.
Sure, and I guess my question is, have the existing programs at the middle school taken grass as far as grass can go? That I think they have in terms of the hours in which they're there. Their intramural program, I believe, goes from about 2:30 to about 3:30, 3:45. Typically after that, youth programs would come onto it. And my last question, again, I'm not sure who the right person is to answer this, but does the school department have a position on the proposal to put turf fields as part of the middle school construction?
I think I want to answer that with two hats on. My hat as superintendent and my hat as a private citizen in this town a long time. As a superintendent, I certainly couldn't say to you that this would be a less than successful project if we didn't have a turf field. I simply could not say that. As a superintendent, I could also tell you that if there were a turf field there, even though it wasn't part of the original proposal, certainly it would be used. It would be used during the day for the various phys ed programs, and it would be used after school, as Margaret said, for the intramurals. Wouldn't be used on weekends. That's another time that our fields get beat up by the youth groups. So would it be an asset to that school? Absolutely it would, and we would use it. But I can't tell you that we have a failure of a project, because if you all come next week to the ribbon cutting, you're going to see a tremendous success. However, as a private citizen, I've lived here a long, long time. And been involved in a lot of projects, and we do not have enough fields in this town, and we can argue we should have had a master plan and so on, and I guess all of us as citizens, not just the building committee, the school committee, needs to take responsibility for not having put that together over time. But we do need more fields, there's not any question, and we need more turf fields for all of the reasons you've heard tonight. So certainly, if I had a vote in any of this, and I don't, you know, you have a straw poll and an opinion. The selectmen gave us an opinion the other night. The school committee next week is going to wrestle. I think I know the school committee. I don't know what the vote of that school committee is going to be, and I don't know what the vote will be when the building committee takes its final vote. But if I had a vote as a private citizen and at a town meeting or whatever, I would say, I'm willing to spend my dollars on something like this. I said at a building committee meeting not long ago, you know, I have no skin in this game. I don't have grandchildren. I have one child who's well beyond playing on fields. So I don't have any, you know, ulterior motive to do anything but to say this town needs more fields, it needs more turf fields, and as an individual, I would be willing to vote for it.
Thank you.
Terrific. At this point, and thank you to members of the audience for staying with this, I'd like to open it up for a few minutes for comments from the audience, and actually looking for folks that we, maybe to start, haven't heard from already tonight who might wish to contribute something to the conversation. The one thing I would just ask is that if you have a comment, that it be something new to the conversation. I think we've established that grass was within the scope of the fields, or the original project. So anyone who's interested in either a question or a comment. Yes, please. Could you come to the mic and identify yourself?
Thank you, and good evening, advisory board members. My name is Valerie Robin. I live at 136 Downer Ave. I wanted to add a few comments and thoughts to this process. And I apologize, I don't want to reiterate what was said, so I'll try to keep this brief. The first thing as I sat here is the voters, not advisory, not the members, but the voters approved the language of the warrant, approving the field. And specifically, advisory recommended us to vote as to that particular warrant. There was an amount in there, and we voted to authorize, as I understood, and I reread the warrant, is authorize the building department with the selectmen. To go back and start telling us what was intended and what was not, I don't think is really fair, because we looked to the advisory to put together that language. And in fact, I believe, if I recall correctly, and I think this might impact some members, is there were other warrants which we were told didn't even rise and we couldn't vote on because they weren't put in the right form on that special, there was I think there was a couple of choices, but yeah, thank you.
The town council determined was not in proper legal format. As a result of that, the Board of Selectmen worked with town council to craft an article that met the petition article, the intent of the petition articles, so that town meeting could hear that. So there was one that was not sort of in the right language, and the Board of Selectmen said, we shouldn't disallow it on that reason. We will submit one that does.
Right. And then the voters voted, and they approved the close to $61 million. With regards to the issue of grass fields, I think it's a little bit of ironic, or at least worth noting, is Phase 3 is called Building Demolition and Construction of New Playing Fields. The fact that perhaps whether it was synthetic or grass did not go before is what gives, I believe, the building authority, which we delegated, to vote on that. And as I think about nice things versus needs versus want, is the building department has already gone through this analysis approximately to the tune of $500,000. For example, when I looked back, I mean, close to $100,000 in change of the stage rigging because it was better for the private citizens as well as the students. That was the grade. We didn't have a whole debate whether you're a theater person, not a theater person, whether that's how we wanted to spend. There was also a couple of other change orders to a wireless scoreboard, not, I mean, is that a need? Do we need a wireless scoreboard? I mean, I don't know. Overhead projections versus ceiling projections. These were all changes. But again, what did the voters vote? That's what they voted for. So when I sit here, and I certainly welcome all the knowledge and the years that everybody from the building department, from advisory board, from selectmen has to add the process, I am troubled that suddenly people are coming in and sort of changing the game. Since when do we go back and vote again? I don't know. I think we need to think about whether we need to end this. I think we're making something a debate that is really not a debate. I think the town council already says they have the authority. I think it's clear that it was already within the scope. Yes, grass versus turf. I mean, there's a lot of finishes that I didn't have a say in, and nor I just want them to make the best decision. I think everybody knows the economics. I don't think there's a debate. Last week I heard it was about $7 more. I think there's another avenue is that over a year earlier, students will be given a field. Isn't that worth something? So for 1 year, we have this opportunity to, students don't go and do physical education. Maybe there's a better place. I don't really know. But I do know is what's been approved and what are we here for. I also think to make this about a process when it's not about a process. You have town council who says you have the authority. I think it's to not act. And I think to not act is almost, we're getting into a dereliction of not doing what we've asked you to do. So if advisory comes in and takes a straw poll, I'm not certain for what purposes. Is that to provide guidance? And respectfully, I mean, I respect everyone's position, but aren't you now taking a role that perhaps that isn't there? I mean, is there a question that should go to town meeting? Put a warrant. But as to this money, if they're allowed to, then what are we really talking about? Thank you.
Make 2 points. The first one is that tonight, as we are going to be voting, it is a recommendation for the school building committee to consider. We fully and completely understand that, consistent with, when, we as a body don't approve or not approve anything. We hear $90 million worth of budgets, but we don't vote a budget, we don't set appropriations, we make recommendations to town meeting. In that capacity, we're a little bit of a custodian of town meeting, a proxy. Back in June, when this proposal was first being discussed, Ray, in his capacity as chairman of the building committee, did something that I thought made sense. He reached out to the chair of the Board of Selectmen, he reached out to the chair of the advisory committee and said, we're talking about doing this. I want to make sure that we have a public, kind of transparent process where we have an opportunity to get a lot of input. And we thought that holding hearings with the Board of Selectmen, the school committee, and the advisory committee would accomplish 2 things. It would help the public see the process and potentially participate in it, and it could potentially inform the school building committee. Because I think what we were also hearing from the school building committee is they're kind of struggling with what to do, and they're looking for a little bit of guidance. So what we are simply doing tonight is offering an opinion or a recommendation, on this. I think you have a strong opinion, which others agree with, and I respect that. You voted a dollar amount and you trust these guys to spend it. I think others in town hold a different view, and part of our job is to discuss both views so that at the end of this, everybody can, the goal here is for everybody to accept whatever decision is made, even if we don't agree. And that's really kind of the purpose of what we're hoping to do tonight.
But then I would respectfully suggest that going forward, if you want to limit these bodies and you want to restrict their authority for better or for worse, then put that to the voters. But I feel like we're reinventing back. I understand what maybe some people would have liked, and I understand perhaps if the building department wasn't certain, but where they've had their town council has indicated, I believe now the dialogue make the best decision. I might not even agree with the decision whether turf is, but that's not the conversation. I guess that's my frustration.
Tom?
Good evening, Tom Hoffman, Sherman Way. I'll try to be unusually brief, difficult for me to do. Hopefully I'll add some flavor to this. This is based on the experience of having worked in the National Football League for 9 years and having a responsibility for fields there with the Patriots, having spent the last 13 years in Hingham Youth Football, being responsible for helping operate Lynch Field, being the father of 4 kids that have competed in sports at 4 different high schools. Now I have a daughter that's participated in the Ivy League and then in the Patriot League. So I've had a lot of experience with fields and conditions and usage. In addition to that, for the past 29 years, I've been in a business where I now serve as a fiduciary advisor to 75 retirement plans. So there's 2 terms I haven't heard tonight. Prudent, the word prudent, I don't think I've heard tonight. Prudent process, which I know you're all following, and that's what we have here, and also return on investment. So let me throw some numbers out to you as you consider return on investment. There was a question about location. The Hingham Middle School has just about 1,000 students. We have 4,200 students in the school system. So fully almost 25% of the students in our school system are located right there at the middle school. They have a very active gym program. When you have a turf field, they can get out there on a decent day. They can be out there in February and March, and they can be out there in November. They can't do that with a grass field. The after-school program is very active. The Hingham Sports Partnership actually underwrites at a cost of $3,500 a year an after-school activities coordinator, so they can get the kids out on the fields. Okay? You heard about the weekend usage. That's there. Well, there was a guy that couldn't be here tonight. Let me tie this together. There was a guy who couldn't be here tonight, Jay McGrail. You all know that name, I believe. He runs the South Shore Country Club. He's a graduate of one of the top turf management schools in the country, the Stockbridge School of the University of Massachusetts Amherst. The guy is unbelievable. Okay? He told me, because he couldn't be here tonight, he said, quote, if they try to put in a grass field at the middle school without irrigation, they're wasting their time and money. Okay, so when we start looking at the pricing options, and I agree, we got to get all the numbers. We got to look at a well. What's that cost? The one at Lynch Field that was paid for, private fundraising, was $27,500, all in, engineering, you name it all. I don't know what Tom Hastings spent on irrigation there, but it wasn't done right. All right, remember, that was a privately funded project. So you're going to add that to the cost when we start doing our comparisons. As you start looking at the return on investment, you heard Ray say earlier, 2 growing seasons. Okay? The experience we had at Lynch Field, 2 growing seasons is not a spring and a fall. It's 2 full years, okay, to take proper rooting. Now, you're hopeful that you have a well in an irrigation system with a grass field, because Jay said if you don't, the stuff will never take root. The next thing you got to look at, what's the cost of drainage, even for a grass field? If you don't have proper drainage, what are you going to have? You're going to have puddling, and the grass isn't going to take root. Okay, so maybe if we do grass and waste the taxpayers' money, we might have use of those fields in 2017. So you need to consider that. I think it was Jim, you mentioned about driving by fields that can't be used. It's probably because they're being rested. Now, the privately funded Ward Street project, as you've probably heard, was all privately paid for. Okay? Those fields are not in use this fall. They're all torn up. I have not seen it myself, but Phil Sullivan, who was here earlier, is a parent at East School. He told me those fields are dirt piles. They're in terrible shape. They're grass fields. They're not properly being taken care of. So I want you to consider all this. There was one other point in here that I thought might be helpful. Oh, as far as other usage, the number I came up with is 3,700. That's the number of kids, and talking to the presidents of other organizations, between baseball, soccer, lacrosse, football, and softball. We've come up with a count of 3,700 kids from Hingham competing. 3,700. That doesn't include the fact that they have kids from other towns come in and play against them. So there's a lot of wear and tear. And the last thing I'll leave you with, when you start comparing your numbers, When we looked at the 2010, getting prepared for town meeting 2010 to talk about the Ward Street project, I contacted 8 college athletic directors I happen to know professionally over the years, and to a person, they all agreed that the foot traffic on an artificial turf field is equivalent to the foot traffic daily usage of 3 natural grass fields. 3, not 2, not 1, 3. Okay, so you got to put that into the equation. So I'm all for the fact that we need more data. We need more data as all the options. And the one guarantee I'll leave you with, if the school building committee tries to build a grass field, I'll be leading the charge against it. It'll be a complete waste of our taxpayers' money to put in a natural grass field with the heavy usage it's going to have. Thank you for listening.
Anyone else? Beth.
Beth Rockoff, 36 Pleasant Street, and I think I should preface, I live across the street from the high school, so in one sense, a new turf field at the middle school would be very nice for my neighborhood, because it will take a lot of traffic away from our neighborhood that has come because of the turf field. Saying that, I'd like to speak to Mr. Coughlin's comments about the risk assessment. And I went to the building school meeting, the first one, and it was my understanding, and I'll need somebody to answer, but Mrs. Mahoney said that no matter what the decision was as far as putting in a turf field, that they would have to grade and seed the grass once the demolition was done in order to maintain the integrity of the land around the existing school. So whether it waited to go to town meeting, which would allow for the process and take away some of the risk, I think we have to put that money in anyhow. And if the town voted to put in another turf field, they still would come in sooner than waiting to put a grass field in. So the benefits would be there. Also, to that effect, if we're going to move forward and put in a turf field, this question about the location, there are only certain daylight hours that are available where coaches, because it will be used mainly for youth sports, coaches are available and school is out. So possibly when we're looking at the location, we do have another lighted location at Beale Street, and maybe the turf field would be a much bigger benefit to the town and the youth organizations if it was placed there versus at the middle school, especially since the middle school does not have these after-school sports, and you say there's no discussion of putting lights in. And also, if you do put it in at the middle school, it's my understanding that a lot of the after-school sports include golf and archery, which cannot be done on a turf. So are we in some way jeopardizing the children at the school and their programs existing by putting it there? So I wonder if by just going through the process and going to town meeting and finding the appropriate location might not make a big cost difference because they're already going to have to grass it anyhow.
Real quick, 2 minutes, and then I'm going to give it to Margaret for the last comment.
Just to reiterate what I think Tim said earlier is the only reason why we're talking about this at all is because there's money available in our budget for the middle school project for things to be built at 1103 Main Street in Hingham. We can't use this money, whatever may be available, to build something at Carlson, to build something at Lynch, to build something anywhere else in town. These are funds available for this project, excuse me, and this project alone. So, you know, there's no point in even discussing whether those other locations are good or bad. Really irrelevant for this discussion.
Final comment.
I just wanted to respond to a couple of things that you said. asking, do we know if the high school project was a success? Is it too early to tell? And I mean, I can tell you in a word, the high school project is sensational, but financially, things that wouldn't get to this board, pretty small potatoes, but you know, as far as me running the program, this past spring, miserable spring, not one cancellation for that field, not one. And what does that mean? That means typically in the spring, you'll start a game, the rain comes, the game has to be called, you have to pay the officials, okay? You have, we line the field once, okay? That's it. This fall, we have field hockey. We're going to line it, just touch up the lines. I mean, we go through paint like crazy on grass fields. These are small financial things, obviously not of big interest to this board, but these are things that make a difference in our program. I also have the opportunity to collect money. And so those are financial things that I didn't have in the past. You know, there was a statement made about, you know, a suggestion that affluent towns are the ones that get synthetic fields. That just really is not a true statement. You know, if you drive through the Commonwealth, many, many, many towns all have synthetic fields because it makes sense. It's because of the longevity it has to offer. And the statement of, if you build it, they will come, that is just so true. And it doesn't matter if it's grass or synthetic. If it's grass, if you build it, they will come. They will definitely be there. And, you know, we will have a lot of teams on those fields. The grass just won't stand up like a synthetic would. And you know, as far as the athletic director, I have a lot of freshman programs. When I go to schedule games, some other schools will say, I'm not sure we're going to have enough kids to get a freshman team. I don't have that problem. And so as you approach all of this, and as we all do, this is a good problem to have. We have a lot of kids that want to participate in healthy endeavors. And it's, you know, our challenge is, okay, how can we make this happen? And so I just think that, you know, we need to approach it that, suppose we were sitting here saying, geez, how can we get the kids involved in things around here? You know, this is a good problem. And, you know, and I'm hoping that you will see it that way. And it's, you know, you have to kind of barrel through it, but it's a very positive thing. You know, our community has always been about families, I think, in taking care of making sure our kids have good opportunities, and that's something I'm proud of in living here. And so, as you approach your decisions, you know, just keep that in mind, that this is, you know, a good thing to have, and if you build it, they will come. Thank you.
Okay, so as a way to start to come to closure on this, and thank everybody for questions, for input, it seems like there were, again, kind of a couple of things that kind of kept coming up. I think the first one was this question of whether the building committee should authorize the installation of a field right now, or whether it is advantageous to take it to a town meeting. I think that's one question that I've heard people kind of talk through. I think a second piece relates to whether, you know, there's been some talk about potentially putting some money towards a design and getting some firmer estimates before kind of anybody makes a decision. And I think it would be helpful to discuss that. And then I think the last piece is, you know, what are our feelings about a turf field at the middle school? So to start out about the process, you know, we've heard some people say this doesn't need to go back to town meeting, and perhaps even doing so might be going backwards. We've heard others say, I'm a little concerned about the precedent this might set. Does anyone have any other comments to add just on the kind of question of process, Ted.
Mary, I guess maybe and I apologize to the lady who brought up the point about we voted on this already in 2011. Disagree or agree on the point, I guess here's my question. Why are we advisory even taking it on? Because if if the building department votes that, hey, we've got authority, the town council has advised us that we can do this, why do we even vote? I mean, I guess I would ask, why did the Board of Selectmen even vote on it? Because if they've got the authority to be able to do it, and I think the advice from town council is move forward on it, but I would recommend you probably get an RFP simply because of the potential conflict that could be arising in it. I really wonder what is the point of our vote. So I personally would say that I would want to wait and see what the board or the building department votes on this issue, because it seems to me that, and maybe I'm just reading between the lines here, there's some disagreement in the committee as to which way to go with this. But wait for their vote, and then we bring it up as a concern, because if they're going to simply say, all right, we're going to follow town council advice, I think our vote is for not.
So point of clarification, town council ruled that they had the right.
Yes.
They didn't rule that they had to make the decision.
The town council has ruled that the legal authority, the school building committee has the legal authority. Some citizens have said just because you have the legal authority doesn't mean you should. Right. And that's why we're taking this up. And I think if you feel that the building committee has the legal authority and that doesn't matter, then it doesn't need to go to town meeting.
I don't think it's a matter of what I think. First of all, I mean, I'm a tax attorney. These are not the legal matters I would even opine on. But I think if town council has advised that you have the authority to do this, I really don't think it really matters what we voted on. It matters what the building committee is going to vote, because they will decide whether they follow that advice or whether they decide to come back to town and say,
the school building committee has reached out to a lot of public bodies to get input. Whether they have the authority or not is very important, but whether it's right or not is the other thing.
Right.
I think if it was more fully embraced by the school building committee, by the school committee, by the Board of Selectmen, your point would be absolutely correct. The fact is that it isn't fully embraced by any of those bodies.
I would completely agree, Tom. I think my point is, I would probably, and Dan, I don't mean to, I'll put your words back in your mouth. Town voted on this. I would say it's not just the committees. Let's bring it back to town vote. And I know it's an emergency meeting we can have or whatever it may be, but if the issue was brought up previously that we have already voted on this issue, I think it's either building committee, go forward with precedent if you have it in place, because hey, we're going to be nice about this. It seems like there's enough issue at hand that I must say that I do like this proposal, which is if there is enough concern, we're worried about what the town is saying about it, bring it to the town and let the town vote. Because honestly, at the end of the day, we're talking 15 people here, 3 people in the Board of Selectmen, and how many do we have on the building, school, apartments, et cetera?
I would also mention that both the Board of Selectmen, the school committee, the advisory committee, we are offering an opinion to the building committee. I mean, frankly, it's the 7-person building committee that makes the determination. And I think one reason that they're reaching out to the town boards for their opinions are because it's 7 of them. And they want to make sure that they are continuing to act in the best interests of the town. Did you have something to add, Craig? Or?
No, I just think, and I don't want to say there's an elephant in the room, but I think we need to remember we have been through similar types of circumstances that have been contentious, emotional, and I think we'd be doing ourselves a disservice if we didn't air it out like this and get the sense of the different boards, the different committees in the town. And I commend the school building committee for looking for that. I think that's a good way to go.
Thank you. Anyone else to add on kind of this question of process?
I'll just make a comment, and that is, there's been a precedent set within this town that if a capital project comes under budget, the savings goes back to the town. So I think that the school building committee, frankly, has been put into somewhat a difficult decision. While they have the legal authority to move forward with this, they need some direction because it's not been done before.
Yeah, and I must admit, I'm a little concerned about the precedent setting for future committees and boards. And that weighs heavily with me. Lucy, do you
I
care?
just want to clarify, Mary, we're talking about taking a straw vote on possibly 2 things or maybe 3. Is the town meeting question to bring the Hingham Middle School fields to town meeting, or to bring the question of the next turf field should go to town meeting?
No, it's the only thing that the question again is, should these guys be making this decision, or should they in some way get some input from town meeting?
So we'll be saying we would ask them to defer the decision,
Well,
or
we can't ask. We can only
recommend, suggest.
We can only recommend.
That or as Tim was saying, that they're not bringing it, but
holding off on their decision until an article were to be formed to ask town meeting its opinion. An appropriation wouldn't be needed, but a town meeting opinion.
And it would be brought by not the school building committee, but
and I don't think we need to settle that right
all right.
now.
So
but
it's specifically the Hingham Middle School turf field being delayed to go to a town meeting in the spring.
It would be a question of should these folks authorize a turf field at the Hingham Middle School without, right now, or get some input from town meeting. And Eric?
One of the distinctions that I've personally drawn, as I've been thinking through this, is between legal authority and a mandate. So take it as a given from town council that the building committee has authority to do this if they choose to. Question and think about whether the special town meeting in 2011 actually provided, or any town meeting since then, actually provided a mandate and can be said to represent the view of a majority, 2/3 majority of the voters of the town, that turf fields is something we want. I also went through the transcript of the 2011 town meeting in doing the background on this. And one of the themes that really comes through in that town meeting is that we've come up with this pretty well-developed plan and this pretty well-developed budget for it, but we actually expect it to come in lower. As a matter of fact, the incumbent chairman of the Board of Selectmen at the time made the comment at that town meeting that our school building committee has pledged to focus on value engineering to bring down the cost even further. The Board of Selectmen will do everything possible to hold them to that pledge. It's our hope that the final price of the middle school will be between $50 and $57 million. And that makes me think about exactly what the voters at that town meeting had in mind when they said yes to this project. And that's what I'm getting at when I say, is there a mandate for this add-on to the project?
Dan, do you get some?
Yeah, just one additional point. I guess my question had been about the risk of going back to town meeting, which I think, as Ray answered it, there is a little bit of a risk, but it's not a big risk. But on the other hand, I think it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for the school building committee to reinforce its credibility with the town. We did something, we built it on budget, we built it below budget. And just like every other project in town, those savings came back to the town, and then we came back and asked, can we use those for something else? And I think the credibility of the school committee and the school building committee would be further enhanced by going through that process.
No.
I think we ought to move on. Just one final thing. I'm not sure. I'll wait for you to give us an indication, but the order of the question.
And
in terms of the way that...
Yep, and you're suggesting...
I'm suggesting do the straw vote first on whether we feel, in our opinion, it's ready for a vote at this point in time.
Okay, so the second question kind of is this ready for a vote? And what it was getting to was some of the concerns raised about some of the preliminary cost and design. And I think we've heard some new information tonight about, a potential path whereby the building committee, the school building committee, would authorize using $45,000 to $50,000 to develop a design that could then be put out to bid. And I think based on some comments around the table, it seemed that some folks thought that was a good idea. And so effectively what it would say is do that design, get the bid, and then make a decision about whether or not to install the turf field. That's the sequence that I think Ray spoke about, which is a little bit more consistent with...
But doesn't that beg the question of whether it should go to town meeting? I
That's the second
respectfully
question.
disagree that ought to be the first question, because if you basically say that you want to expend that money for design, you're basically saying, go ahead and make the decision on your own without town meeting input.
I guess the only thing I was thinking of, Tom, is that decision and that work could, for whatever reason, make it very clear that it's not practical to go forward.
Yeah. You spend $50,000, whatever the dollar is for design planning, then you go to town meeting and the town says no. Now we've just, not say wasted $50,000, but we spent it unnecessarily at this time. So why not just first figure out, does the town want to do this? As we said in the past, the precedent says any savings goes back to the town. Then the town decides what they want to do with the money. Decide that first. Does the town want to do this? And then if they say yes, design it, plan it, build it.
Yeah, but won't the town say, what's this going to cost?
Yeah.
And then how do you actually vote on something you don't know what it's going to cost?
It's kind of a chicken and the egg.
It is.
It always is.
And it goes back to...
I go back to what Dan said, which is the precedent is to give it back, and to not do so shakes some of the credibility of the committee, of the building committee, because in the past, committees that have had given funds to spend and have excess have always given it back, and it gives some credibility to the committee.
Linda?
Yes, but I think that, again, the school building committee has been very prudent in their financial decisions. And to me, this is a financial decision on how to best use the taxpayers' dollars. And we know that because of the economics work, that if you turf field, upfront costs more, maintenance lower throughout, so at the end of 30 years, it's a wash, or the turf field is actually an advantage. It's going to give us more fields and more playing time. We trusted them to value engineer over $2 million out of a project. That's a big decision. That's a lot of money. I think we can trust them to make this kind of a decision. Again, we're going to build a field. It's just whether or not it's grass or turf. We're not kind of getting into building something that was never even thought of. But I do think this would be a fiscally responsible decision, because it has been proven that it is economically a better decision in the long run for the taxpayers, and that's what we're really talking about. And the available funds. They are there. We're not asking for any more. You know, they're unused, and I think it would, again, look at it as the best interest of how to use taxpayer dollars. That's the way I'm trying to look at it.
Thank you.
One, we had grass there before. Did we need a little bit more maintenance? Yes, but it sufficed. Two, those funds, towns, we should be given back to the town to be decided how to use them. Yes, they valued it down, but again, if we do this decision and that they get to spend it, what happens with the next project with his excess funds? Sets the precedent that those excess funds can be spent at the discretion of the committee because they have them available.
Okay, I don't think we're adding anything
Yeah,
new.
okay.
Let's go ahead.
I think we could kind of chicken and egg the question of which do you go first, but that seems a little tricky. I'm going to try to reword this to reflect Tim's feedback, because initially we said recommending the school building committee seek town meeting approval, and I don't think that was intended to say you guys carry it forward. I think the concept here is what is our recommendation to you on whether or not to seek town meeting approval. So I think that's what we're doing. I'm going to read this, and if
You ready?
and I'm also going to say, this is not, again, we are taking a straw vote. This is a recommendation. This is not binding. So this is, so.
Mayor, if I could just procedurally just ask.
Very quickly.
So there is no chance with the town. We voted, obviously, October 2011, so that must have been an off.
It was a special town meeting.
So there's no opportunity for us to bring such a special town meeting before now and still give us the opportunity to build a turf field? I'm just asking. Because I want to understand procedurally.
No, it is a good question. So typically, a special town meeting is called under one of two circumstances. One circumstance is if there is something, a piece of town business that is going forward, where the timing does not allow it to wait until April. In the case with the middle school, the MSBA needed a commitment, and if we waited until April, we basically would have lost our place in line. The other trigger for a special town meeting on something is a citizen petition, and I believe it's a modest number of signatures, but citizens can call a special town meeting on a matter so long as council says that it is in good standing and within the authority of town meeting. I would say that is not our practice. I would say that special town meetings are typically reserved for events where the timing is such that there is a time sensitivity that is more significant than waiting until town meeting in April.
And we're saying that this is not such an issue to rise to that level.
I don't think we're making a determination on that. I think we're basically giving an opinion to the school building committee whether this question of process should the building committee go ahead and make this decision, or would the school building committee be advised to get an opinion from town meeting? So that's kind of what we're asking. The mechanics, the timing.
Okay. Let's go.
So
read it.
I'm going to read this. So what I'm going to ask is, all in favor of recommending that the school building committee authorize the installation of a turf field at Hingham Middle School prior to a town meeting vote. So if you think the school building committee has the legal authority, as Linda said, we trust them, they should go do this, we've asked town meeting, you vote yes.
Or not just the legal, but the...
And if you think it's the right thing to do. Okay? Lucy, you're looking at me.
That's not what I thought we were going to say, so say it again.
Okay. So, all in favor of recommending the school building committee authorize the installation of a turf field at Hingham Middle School prior to a town meeting vote? So, in other words...
Do it now.
Do it now. I'm just trying to come up with the right language. Do it now. If you think the school building committee should do it now and town meeting is not necessary, you vote yes. If you think that, if you would like to recommend to the school building committee that they wait for town meeting, you would vote no. Does that make sense? Okay. All in favor of recommending the school building committee authorize the installation of a turf field at the Hingham Middle School prior to a town meeting vote, please say aye.
How about raising your hand?
And raise your hand, please.
We want to record this.
Okay.
Raise your hand. Keep them raised.
Two.
Keep them raised.
Okay.
Two.
Ted and Linda.
Okay.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. And Jim, since this is not a formal vote, it is a recommendation, I would indicate in the minutes that members, Kutch and Joyce recommend,
Yep,
do it in that fashion.
I'm earning my pay tonight.
Okay. So the second question has to do with the...
It was 2 to 10. You don't vote.
Correct. Okay. Then the second question is on this question of whether we would recommend that the... first of all, we talked about, do we think that there's enough information right now? I think since we just voted, since our recommendation is to carry it to a town meeting, I think the next question would be, do we recommend that the school building committee authorize funds for design of a synthetic turf field for consideration for approval? Okay.
Does that make sense, having voted what we voted in the first question?
Well, I guess the question is, the thing is, if the majority is recommending that town meeting weigh in, do we go to town, do you say to town meeting, here's what we want to do, but we don't know how much it's going to cost? Or do we say, or do we recommend to the school building committee that they utilize some dollars for design that would allow for cost estimates that would support a decision on installation of a field?
Wait, that,
Yes.
sorry. So that goes back to the question of two things. One, the first vote I thought was an intention, you're telling that we're going to keep the precedence, which is any return, any excess money goes back to the town. It also brings up a concern we've always had in the past, which is if you start the ball rolling on something, the perception of a lot of people in town is it's going.
Yes. Okay.
So, I'm just saying, if you
Yep.
say, let's stop planning, spending the money, then the project's going to happen.
Yep. Who else would add?
Offer a suggestion as to wording of the second question? Are you
Please.
open to that?
Absolutely.
The first question was all in favor of recommending that the school building committee authorize installation of a turf field prior to a town meeting vote. Perhaps the second question could be all in favor of recommending that the school building committee expend X funds to further develop a proposal for a turf field prior to a town meeting vote, or something to that effect.
Can you say that again? Thank
Sure.
To expend funds.
And maybe set a number in there, I don't know if you want to,
Yep.
to develop a proposal for a turf field at the middle school prior to a town meeting vote.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's clearer and more specific.
Yeah.
So, and I think Jim is making the point that that's going down a little bit of a slippery slope. Are there other points of view before we vote?
I would have the opposite opinion of Jim in that I think this would provide us with a 3 or 4 month time period to not only design the optimal playing field, because we don't know what design we want to move forward with. That's going to take some time and some money, and I think town meeting deserves specific information as to how much what is being proposed would cost.
Okay. Donna?
Would we want to soften the question in any way to say, you know, if the building committee wants to go forward, that we would recommend that town meeting likely needs some additional information? The way we're phrasing it, it's almost as if we're directing them. And
Yep.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so right now I have all in favor of recommending the building committee expend funds to develop a proposal.
If they so choose.
If they so choose.
Because technically they don't have to.
Okay.
They've got $2.5 million, and yet they'll expend it, and we didn't have to ask
Okay.
you guys in the first place.
The suggestion that I would make, I know Ray has given a preliminary cost number, but again, because this is non-binding, because we don't have a lot of paper in front of us, I would prefer to leave this as expend the necessary funds, as opposed...
Do you want a ceiling on that?
I think we just say expend the necessary funds, because I don't personally feel like we're equipped to set that, and it doesn't feel like it would be helpful.
Really, one quick question. The contingency funds.
Yes.
In the fact you open a school, Ray might be honest, you open the school and something occurs. I don't know any building that ever opens and it's
Oh,
perfect.
so in October...
So the heating system doesn't work, electricals, whatever it might be, it doesn't work perfectly. Is that money still used to...
You have warranties, correct?
Yeah, real quick. So there are warranties that come with the
Okay.
construction contract. Obviously, the mechanical systems that go in, there's manufacturer warranties, there's installation warranties, contract warranties. That last for, typically 1 year, 2 years, depending on what the service is or the mechanical system. Right. Well, but I would point out that when the school opens on September 2nd, we're going to cut the ribbon next week. The school opens on September 2nd. School building committee's work is not done. All right, we're not going to be even done, I think, in the spring when we finalize perhaps the site work, assuming we go forward with the current schedule. I think it'll be some months after that, several months after that, where we do a final closeout of this project, as was the case with the members of the building committee before my tenure on East School and the Plymouth River and Foster projects. In fact, when I came on in March, I believe, of 2011, they had just finished or then closing out little minor details of the East School project. And I think I looked at a final closeout report of the project manager for that project that was dated in late 2010.
So,
A second straw. All in favor of recommending the school building committee expend the necessary funds to develop a proposal for the installation of a synthetic turf field if they so choose? If you support that idea, vote yes.
That is okaying the authorization of spending contingency funds to do estimates.
It is, the source of this would be the contingency funds. So if,
So we know that.
There is no other source.
There is no other source. Yep. And so again, if you don't like the idea of spending contingency dollars on something like this, you vote no. If you're comfortable, you vote yes. So,
Can I have one more thing on that before you take a vote? And that is, I think Mr. Estes earlier, in response to Mr. Taylor's question, had suggested that the engineering work to put together a design would be in the order of $45,000 or $50,000. Although we haven't set a cap on this, that's my understanding of the ballpark.
yeah, I think my suggestion to the committee is that we not insert a dollar amount because I don't feel like we're equipped to do that. And I think by saying the necessary funds, it's saying, you know, we trust you guys to, you know, put this design together, do the engineering. Okay, all in favor of recommending the school building committee expend the necessary funds to develop a proposal for installation of a synthetic turf field if they so choose, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Keep them up for a second.
Maybe it's easier. Who is not?
Okay.
Ted and Jim?
Okay.
Okay.
Jim, you are opposed? Okay, so, okay, and one abstention. Okay.
Dan, you were opposed, I think? Were you opposed or in favor?
In favor. Yes, so we have
Little timing difference.
one opposed, one abstention, the balance in favor.
So that,
Okay.
Carol, that's 10 to 1 to 1.
Okay. I think at this point, the question of whether we support a turf field at the middle school is a premature decision based on our previous votes. So at this point, I'm going to close off discussion on this topic. I'd ask if we still have just a couple minutes of business, so if you're heading out, I would just ask you to, if you're going to continue some conversations, please take those out in the hall so that we can finish up. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Your hair looks lovely this evening.
These last few items in 5 minutes, if I could. I think everyone's received their liaison responsibilities. I would just ask that if you're the chair of a subcommittee, that you do two things. One is to just kind of reach out to your department heads or committee heads to kind of let them know that you are the liaison. I would also ask that if you're the chair for a subcommittee, in particular, please reach out to our new members. It might be helpful to, you know, grab a cup of coffee and talk about the different departments. But if everyone could do that, I would very much appreciate it. And for our new members, if you have questions about, you know, different departments, things that are going on, I would suggest that you initially direct those questions to the subcommittee chair, who can either answer them, get you the information, or put you in touch with the right folks. The other item we have...
Mary?
Yes, please.
Just one quick, I just wanted an FYI for everyone that I've already been in touch with Mary Savage, and it appears that we're going to have a busy zoning article this year.
Okay.
Right now, they had a preliminary meeting, and they discussed, I have 20 bullet points. Mary seems to think she started 11. Which means that those are the ones she thinks will possibly go forward. But I just thought everyone should know I'm going to get with my committee. And one of those going forward could be accessory homes, or accessory units in existing homes.
So like in-law apartments, and I know that's something they've contemplated for a bit. Okay, thank you. And as it goes on, if we find that within certain places there's a need to sort of adjust some liaison assignments, have somebody else involved in planning zoning, we'll try to do that. to the extent we
very
can.
preliminary.
Yeah.
Like I said.
Okay. I'm just going to jump out of sequence for a moment. The reserve fund transfer, just in your folders, on July 2nd, I was asked to sign a reserve fund transfer in the amount of $2,127, and this was for part-time clerical salaries within the Board of Selectmen's office, primarily in the lead-up to town meeting and some of the end-of-the-year closeout. And it was something that just was overlooked in the Board of Selectmen's office, and so I did sign that, and you have a copy for your folders. The last item I wrote on here, end-of-year celebration closeout, which is a formal way of saying that Donna and Ted did such a great job on our end-of-the-year party that we have some surplus funds. And in the event that anyone is still watching at home, just a quick explanation. Each year, the advisory committee hosts a thank you party for the folks who we work with during the year. And this is a party that we typically have in a member's home, and all the costs associated with this party are basically we all make donations to that. So it is 100% private funded. There is no taxpayer impact. Ted, it's $400 and change remaining.
Actually, just around, it's $474. I think we still have the $25 item.
Okay, so so about $450, which for 15 members, Tom and I didn't feel like we wanted to make a decision on members' behalf. I think we have three options. One option is to write 15 checks to the 15 members who contributed last year, and everybody gets a little bit of a rebate. Another option would be to hold on to those funds and apply them to the next year's party. And a third option would be to do something else with it, some sort of donation. So I would welcome feedback from the committee.
I think there should have been better chairman gifts if that was.
that flat screen would have been an option.
But I would vote for the second two, one of the two second options. I'd rather give it back because first of all, not everybody's still here.
Right.
And B, I think we could be put to good use either rolling it forward or, I think we've got enough fundraising, or I should say charitable options. Lincoln Whiting, Foss, there are a number of different things that we could make.
$29.94 per person.
Or each person could decide for themselves.
Yep. Other thoughts?
I would like to give paid for into some sort of benefit of charity.
Benefit of charity?
I would recommend that we put it towards the Foss Memorial, given that it was such a significant discussion last year. Are they collecting money?
No, not at the, well, they will be. They will be, yes.
Is there a point of view that people would like us to write 15 checks to return to, okay?
One thing I thought about is, I believe Leslie, who's the animal, I think she takes gift items for supporting animals and stuff. I think she's been doing it on the past. I was just going to throw that out there as consideration to write a check to her.
So I'm going to make a suggestion.
I have a concern. If we did option 3, you can have 15 different. I like the idea of making a contribution. I'm concerned that we can't come to an agreement on what that should be.
Yeah. So roll it forward, which I think the 4 previous members would agree. And I'm glad I'm to be chair this year. I'm going to get a good gift.
Yeah, baby.
And we had to change the rules of the
party. Can I make
a
recommendation that we roll the $450 for to next year's?
Well, the other thing now, we could also revisit the tariff.
Right.
We bumped it up, and obviously we didn't need to.
I think it also suggests that the increase that we might not be necessary due to the.
It's a microcosm of the text.
For our new members, for the benefit of our new members, for the benefit of our new members, it's a little bit of an advisory tradition that the new members collectively plan this party, which I think is a little sadistic because you haven't been to this party and the rest of us have. But as Ted and Donna got great help from Lucy, I know they'll be eager to help out. Okay, we'll do that. Yeah. Just as a note, I am going to be sending out an email to everyone in the next day or so asking about scheduling for a next meeting. I would rather wait to schedule a meeting until we have enough business on our docket. There is a SPED funding question that will come up. There may be a few other things. I'm tentatively looking at September 16th, 23rd, or 30th. So I think I'll just poll everybody for availability. If we don't have enough business to have a meeting, I'm not going to have a meeting. So I think that will unfold over the next few weeks. I don't have any matters anticipated within 48 hours. Does anyone have anything else?
Did you mention compliance?
Oh, thank you, Lucy. In your folder, there, in your packet, there is the conflict of interest, and there is in the back there is an acknowledgement that you have received this. So if everyone could sign that and return it to Jim Taylor, if you want to sign it and hand it to him on the way out. I think everyone got a notice from me about those who need conflict of interest training. If anyone needs the website address to do that online, that's also available.
Consideration the 16th of September is the live town ethics. I was planning on attending that instead of the online one.
Okay, yes.
Just going to mention in
so
case.
So we'll do the 23rd or the 30th. Thank you.
I don't have it.
It's not here? Okay, I will take a note to, I will email that out to everyone.
What would be helpful, too, if essentially trouble, is to just tell the people on the current board who has to do the test from last year.
Do you have that, Tom?
A lot of us have done it twice now. It's every 2 years.
Yeah.
And I think we probably should know that.
Jim and I will
Just
notify.
say, these people need to do the test.
I'll track it down with David Basler.
Be great.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, Jim is holding it up.
It looks like this.
Just acknowledgement
And then you need to
of receipt.
acknowledge receipts.
Thank you very much.
From David Basler.
Yep. I will follow up with David on who needs to be recertified.
Yeah, you can sign it.
It's every 2 years, so for Ted and Donna, you're set. Would anyone like to channel Bill Wise and make a motion? Okay, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.